He did.
Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020, and we are here at the Freeport High School cafeteria. We have a couple board members not with us this evening, Jeremy Clough and Maura Pillsbury, but the rest of our board is here, and our student rep this evening is Brady Grogan. Welcome back. He came back for a second meeting. That's always a good sign. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the October 28th and November 4th, 2020 meetings as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Susanna, Lindsay, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed. Great. Adjustments to the agenda? I believe we have two.
Yes, we have two, and I think we'll put them both under new business. The first one will be to discuss going to a hybrid model for board meetings. And the second one will be an update on the solar agreement.
Okay. So we will get right into the agenda and start with good news and recognition. And we will look to Brady for our student report.
All right, fall sports officially came to the end last week with this online sports awards. As far as I know, it was the first ever digital one, and it went very smoothly. Winter sports are slated to start on either December 7th or 14th, so it's right around the corner. The freshman class is currently holding a pie sale from November 18th to November 30th. So if you would like one, please buy one and help support the class of 2024. And then next week, we finally reached Thanksgiving break, getting Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday off from school.
We hear cheering from the crowd as well as the students. All right, thank you very much. And we will move on to good news from the Durham Community School. Will Pidden.
Good evening. Actually, it's Will Pidden and then Kelly Rogers also. So rather both of us sharing a piece. I think perhaps one thing we just want to sort of highlight is that it's never been more evident, sort of the community in Durham Community School than everything that's had to go on this fall to have school running how it is running and continuing to evolve from the very first day of school until right through today. I mean, today at our staff meeting we had teachers working on learning new skills with technology, constantly adapting to the needs of either hybrid plus, the potential for temporary or longer red. They are juggling all of these pieces day by day. So an update from the school. We now have pre-K were all in school from the beginning, but we also, as of last week, have all of kindergarten, first grade, and fifth grade have returned to 5-day-a-week schooling, which has gone well to this point. We have approximately 300 students each day at school, which also then includes 20 students attending the Wolf's Neck program. So around 70% of the school are able to attend in-person experiences on a daily basis. And then 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who aren't at school, or if they're at home on their yellow day, they also now have access to synchronous lessons throughout their day also. We have at this point sort of maxed out what we can accommodate currently in our elementary classrooms. So we are aware that there's still some families who don't have access to 5-day offerings, but they have been very supportive also. The other piece is just the entire school community doing a great job of navigating these different demands. So there's been a lot of patience with shifts and changes from students, staff, and families. The teachers have been incredibly flexible, adjusting, as I say, right through the fall. And this sort of shared commitment to doing what can be done to support children being in school and maintaining safety for everybody in the building, from staff to children to families. So families have been very responsible about getting children to school with masks, teaching them in great habits and routines. The students have been amazing, very responsible about masks and sanitizing. We have bus drivers in during the day helping clean the building, so there's multiple cleanings occurring throughout the day that's been handled throughout Dennis's team of drivers and custodians. And then, as I say, the teachers continuing to learn new pieces whilst acting upon the things they already know and the skills they already have. So it's a sort of a celebration, and we really appreciate everybody within the school community contributing to make that possible right now. Then for another piece, Kelly's going to share another factor.
So once we've been able to welcome our kids back and get everybody feeling more in the swing of things, things have kind of settled into feeling a little bit more normal, which is wonderful. You know, you walk into the classroom, it's pretty amazing to see, especially at the younger level, where you'd think the mask would be an issue and lots of fidgeting with it. It's not a thing anymore. But there's been a lot of things that make it feel more normal again. And one of the things I'd like to highlight for you all are some of the other areas of enrichment that our kids are getting involved in, our after-school clubs and the community programs that are offered. We had a remote STEM club occur, which was very cool. We had a lot of kids engaged in a writing club. Our guidance counselors ran a ropes club, are continuing to run it. There's an art club and a drama club. Our drama team is working on doing rather than having a in-person performance, they're working on a virtual filming of their production. Band is going, including beginner band. They're working on learning the drums. We have our civil rights team that's up and running. And then we have had some activities that have been kicked off through the community programs. Kickball's on hold right now, but we have had kids involved in like the hip hop, dance piece, and mad science. So there's a lot going on that our kids are involved in, which is very cool to see. They're very excited about it. And even if they're in a situation where they are at home on the day that the activity's taking place on, their parents are still committed to bringing them in so they can participate. So it's very cool to see all of these things happening and our kids getting involved again. So thank you.
Thanks. I didn't know if Will had something else you wanted to share. You're good. You don't have too long. You'll be back up here, so. Okay, so we will move on to the first public comment of the evening. I don't know if we have, I can't see behind some of the polls, if we have any folks that are here to speak in person, but we also have the Zoom available. I don't know if we've got anybody in there.
We have one person who's attending, but I don't see a hand up yet, so.
Okay. So if you are the person who's attending via Zoom and you'd like to speak, please feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom, and we'll realize that is your request, and we will get you hooked in, and I don't think anybody in person. So we'll give them just a quick second because there is a bit of a delay between the live stream and the Zoom. So. No? Okay. And there is another public comment period at the end of our agenda. So if anybody misses this one, you can feel free to access that Zoom to participate in the public comment at the end. All right, so we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. We've had, unfortunately, another COVID case in RSU 5 at Freeport High School that we found out about today. So we now are at 4 confirmed cases and 3 probable, for a total of 7 of our students having COVID since the return to school in September. There still have been no staff members with COVID. And as you know, the data in the state is trending upwards, and including in our own communities. As of this morning, Freeport now is up to 40 cases. Durham is up to 12. Pownell remains at less than 5 cases. And this is an increase of 13 since my last report. I continue to be concerned about the way the data is trending here and throughout the states. And because Androscoggin has been placed in yellow, we have been put on hold for sports and practices until Androscoggin returns to green. So I'm hopeful by that December the 7th that Androscoggin will be in green so we can start our winter sports. The holidays are arriving next week, as Brady seems very excited to announce. And so I just have to remind families that the only states that are now exempt from having to quarantine are New Hampshire and Vermont. So if you travel outside of these states, then your child must self-quarantine for either 14 days or have a COVID test before returning to school after Thanksgiving. Our Hybrid Plus continues to go well. We continue to invite more students back to the 5-day-a-week learning, as you just heard from Principal Pidden. And yesterday I was able to visit Wolfneck Farm with Principals Nickerson and Grimm and see our students fully enjoying outdoor learning. There were students sharpening their wilderness skills, learning about the temperatures in composting piles. They were really enjoying that. Discovering the different characteristics of trees, tending to animals on the farm, and one group was doing a scavenger hunt. And I will say they were all very thoroughly engaged and enjoying life on the farm. We have begun, believe it or not, the budget process. It seems to have really arrived quickly this year. The administrative team has now met twice to begin to look at needs and priorities for next year, and our individual budget meetings will begin the first week in December. Just an update on our equity work. The administrative team began their book discussion on how to be an anti-racist. These discussions will occur monthly. Building principals are working on their equity goals at the school level. As far as the audit goes, the focus groups have now all been completed and the consultants are compiling the results. We are waiting to hear from them on next steps concerning the audit. And then we also, the 10 staff that are enrolled in the Cultural Competence Institute with Lawrence Alexander will be meeting on November the 30th. And then we did get word back from our attorney, and we are going to adjust the language in the student handbooks one more time to read appropriate attire is that which does not interfere with the instructional programs or otherwise cause disruption, and we're just getting rid of the wording around the distracting. A reminder that the policy committee is going to be looking at the recently adopted Title IX policies. If you have any revisions that you would like considered, please send that to either Candy, who is the policy chair, or Assistant Superintendent Alexander. Their next meeting is December the 4th, so they would love your feedback if you have any by Tuesday, November 24th. I'd also like to report the resignation of Pierre Martin, Learning Lab instructor with the community programs. And as Thanksgiving is next week, I do want to conclude my report tonight with a note of gratitude to our staff in RSU 5, to our board, to the administrative team, many who are here tonight, who continue to work hard to keep our students safe and at the same time to provide a quality education for them. I want to thank our students, who I think continue to amaze me on how resilient that they truly are, as I feel like I witnessed yesterday at the farm. They just go with the flow, and they are extremely flexible and adaptable. If it wasn't for their mask, you just would not have known that we had a pandemic that was going on when I was out there yesterday. And lastly, I really want to thank our families who have been quick to keep their kids home when they have shown any symptoms, and I hope that they will continue to do so, because that's what has provided us the opportunity to keep going in our hybrid model and not having to go to full remote learning, which I'm just very grateful for. So that concludes my report for tonight.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to administrator reports, and we'll start with finance. Rick.
Good evening, everyone. Your financial reports were in your package, and there's nothing of significant nature that I need to report on with regard to your finances. I will say that we are spending a great deal of money, but it's other people's money. CRF1 and CRF2 expenditures are really at the forefront of expending money. As you probably are aware, that money expires at the end of December. So Assistant Superintendent Alexander and I and all of the principals, all the building administrators are working very diligently to make sure that our needs are met with regard to the resources that we need to defend ourselves against this coronavirus. But other than that, the expenditure rate is a little low, as you might expect, because we're using other people's money to buy the things that we need. But other than that, you're in very good shape with regard to your finances at this time. And I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
I have a quick question. The CRF funds, I understand how we're funding those expenditures. Do they show up in the expenditures on this report, or are they kind of separate from this because they weren't part of the budget?
They're under a different fund code. The fund code for CRF is 2606. Your reports are all general fund 1000. So they don't show up here because they're not impactful of local funds.
Okay, so okay, my question, the reason I asked that was to make sure that, if it looked like we were overspending in a certain area, it could be that it's not necessarily the case because we're funding it from somewhere else, but they don't even flow through here at all.
Now, I'm going to clarify that a little bit, Michelle, because at the beginning of the fiscal year in July and a portion of August, the CRF funds weren't set up at that time. So some expenditures out of the general fund did incur, and as we apply for reimbursement, those expenditures will be journaled out and journaled to 2606 and then submitted to the state for reimbursement.
Okay, great. Thank you. Looks like you're good. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
All right. We've given Will all the rest we're going to give him, and he's up again. And Kelly. Sorry, Kelly. I don't know. Has everybody on the board met Kelly? Kelly is the assistant principal. Kelly Rogers, at the assistant principal at the Durham Community School, just in case not everyone's met her.
Well, we couldn't bring free money like Rick did. So our gesture was that Kelly came, because then I'll be more concise. So it's almost as good as free money, I would suggest. So we're going to start off by just doing a quick review of last year's goals. I believe everybody has a copy. We don't have a screen to project to, but Kelly will take us through that first goal.
So as I think you can see in your packets, the first goal supports the first strategic goal of the district. And it was year one of two to implement a school-wide model that nurtures a positive culture and enhances academic and social-emotional skills across our pre-K to 8 community. So the overview really of that work was our responsive classroom training and implementation. We had a heavy focus on morning meeting in particular in our pre-K to 5 range, and then in advisory for our 6 to 8 range. So we had lots of people attend the week-long training the summer prior, and then throughout the year before COVID, we had monthly staff meetings to support that work. That was In addition to staff engaging in the content, we structured our staff meeting time to replicate the morning meeting structure so that not only were staff learning about it, but they were able to experience it and then take some of those tools and implement it right away into their classrooms. We also restructured our K-2 assemblies to support the work, so not to just work to build community within each classroom, but to also build community across the grade level, which was actually really cool. Our students, so an impact of that was that our students really had a lot more voice and engagement during those assembly times than in the past. We also started to implement the risk screener that you may have heard about from other schools. We only got to administer it in the fall and in the winter. At that time, we did have grade level teams be able to dig into that work and think about their cohort and respond to the specific needs that they saw arising in that data. Our guidance team also dug into the data to think about at a more global level what are our needs and how can we address those. We also worked hard to build more positive bus culture. We had developed clear and consistent expectations, which we were then able to reinforce with our bus teams. And although they might not have always admitted it, our amazing celebrations for our Golden Bus tickets. We were working really hard to catch kids doing great things on the buses. They would make like bus goals. Okay, guys, we're really working on this expectation. And our drivers did a really great job trying to reinforce that. They were recognized for more specific things rather than just a good bus ride. We also worked hard to continue to increase fieldwork opportunities, which unfortunately was kind of canceled when COVID hit, but our team started to do some really great thinking about opportunities that are more local, that really would support more of our curriculum than maybe what had been done in the past. And we were really looking inside about, how is this experience specifically going to tie into what the outcome of their grade level is. Some of the impacts of all of that work were that I know I didn't touch upon attendance earlier, but what we noticed was that there was definitely an improvement and more proactive steps put in place to support kids from eventually getting to a truancy level. We were able to really support kids in getting plans in place ahead of time in families, which was really great to see. 100% of our teachers were trained in responsive classroom, and it was implemented. The morning meetings and the advisories were implemented 100% across the building. We saw, again, I had mentioned before, but we saw a significant increase in student engagement in our collective team meetings, our assemblies, which was very awesome. And then we also saw cross-grade level teams working hard to make opportunities for reading buddies, science chats, and also some mentoring happening from our older kids for our younger kids. But then again, some of those plans were put on hold. But we are looking forward to a time when we can continue that work. Leading into next steps, we really were hoping to be able to continue, and we will continue our responsive classroom learning into teacher language using the mentor text power of our words. To really do a deep dive into our own language that we're using with students as we support them through their learning or social situations or just our everyday communication with them. And then we also want to continue to explore ways to maximize our outdoor learning spaces. We worked really hard this summer to try to create the spaces, but we definitely recognize we have more work that we can do. We're blessed with a beautiful campus and access to lots of outdoor space, but we definitely know that we want to continue to maximize that for our community. We also would like to continue learning about and reflecting on the implementation of the practices that we've learned and got going on from last year and really working to deepen them. What's amazing to see is that when staff learn something new, they take it and they adapt it in many different ways. And so then really the next step is having staff connected to each other so that they can learn from each other. our staff, very proud of our staff. They work very hard and are very creative and have taken some of these concepts and really, ran with them. And students are definitely benefiting because of it. And then again, continuing to explore the field work opportunities. We're really looking at the local pieces, and continuing to plan with each other and and with the community on what maybe doesn't even cost money but is local to us, to boost learning. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And then on the second goal, and I think really the theme, not only of these two goals from last year, but also as we move into the goal for this year, is they're very evident of the benefits of having a school district and an RSU, because we have benefited from collaborating with the other schools and we learn from each other. The examples that Kelly was just sharing, both Moore Street School, the Mars Landing School, was like a year ahead in that cycle. And so we had great resources and support from Julie and Emily and their staffs in terms of some of the things they had learned with implementation. So it's been very beneficial. Likewise, this second goal, and some of this will start to sound familiar from what you heard, because one of these goals was very much aligned with Lisa Demick's goal with Pownell, and it was the work we had done as a district, specifically at the K-5, pre-K-5 level, to focus in on what the PD focus should be to try and reduce some of the overload on our elementary teachers. So there had been defined areas for which grade spans would work with strategists or with external PD supports through like TC or Everyday Math. We had a planned common staff meetings time with Pownell to collaborate so that the grade level teams could work together between our school and the Pownell Elementary School. And that was then supported also with the strategists as ways to have responsive planning time for teachers. Within that work, we had then also been focused around, well, I should just say for that, the feedback from teachers throughout last year on that work was very positive in terms of the benefit of, for our school, having a fresh set of eyes in their team, and from Pownell colleagues of having other colleagues to bounce ideas off and to share some of that load. It really became evident when we had to transition in to remote learning last March, where those partnerships continued with the teams working together to co-plan or co-deliver material when we were in a remote setting. So it was an unanticipated kind of application of that work, but certainly provided some evidence of the benefits of it. Another piece that was a part of that cycle for us was then to really zoom in on implementation of intervention cycles in both literacy and math in our school, where the formative and ongoing assessments get really zoomed in on and looked at to identify students most needing of some support or the effectiveness of that support or of our tier 1 practices. So those aspects were all implemented last year and continue on through this year. And unfortunately, this was a goal that, like our other goals, it kind of got 2/3 of the way through it before we had to sort of shift. So as I mentioned, while we saw the benefits of the collaboration and early feedback of a reduction in some of the demands on the teaching staff, we didn't get to fully see through this work, and we did not get to complete our sort of spring assessments, which were part of our sort of data gathering point for that. Moving forward, we had planned similar practice this year. We see this as a beneficial practice. We co-worked with Lisa and her staff at Pownell. We had started with some of that shared planning. We've had to adapt a little bit because some of our grade levels are still in hybrid, where some of their corresponding grade levels at Pownell are now in green, and so therefore There's slightly different demands in pacing, but we feel like we're going to be back on track with them in terms of identifying the areas that still would be beneficial, that are shared needs and shared ways of working on the curriculum. Those were last year's goals. We had looked at, when we shared the goals last year, the responsive classroom had been year 1 of 2, and this second year the intention had been to do a whole school sort of book study on a book from Responsive Classroom, The Power of Our Words, which really focuses on having consistent expectations and consistent use of language from staff, which is something that we're very much invested in. However, given the current circumstances and the demand on staff, and talking with Superintendent Foley, we have just limited the goals this year to 1 goal. That the Power of Our Words, we have all the books, so the teachers actually have all the books because we were starting down that pathway. But we will return to that for next year. And we have just focused in on the district goal of the staff having, as a school, but also within the grander scheme of the district, identifying a pathway of sustainable practice for diversity, inclusion, and equity. So very much in a similar vein to what you would have heard from our colleagues in our other schools. We have a focus upon leadership, really getting a deeper understanding of these important factors, that working with the district team and the district administrative team as the district audit takes place. Our school leadership team meets regularly for every aspect, but each part there's a discussion about this, identifying and sharing resources that are applicable and accessible to colleagues. Our guidance team have started a civil rights team, which was new to our school. Right now they have that starting up during the day, but our hope is, and you'll probably hear some of this when we finally get around to budget, but in initial conversations, a number of our schools are talking about adding in a more robust civil rights team at a lower level than just middle school. That we continue to take advantage of the professional partnerships we have with our curriculum models, both from Responsive Classroom and Teachers College. One of the factors that we started work on last year but continue to work on and actually got a little bit of a boost from the CRF funds is the ability to refresh some of our classroom libraries, and as we do that, making sure that they reflect a much more diverse and inclusive sort of sense of society beyond our own 4 walls, and then culminating with what will be Durham Community Schools model within the broader RSU 5 model, as we look at this being a district-wide goal and what that school goal will be within that context. So that will be what our sort of professional goal will be for this coming year. Are there any questions that I can answer about any of that?
Valerie.
Thank you, Will. That was a great explanation. I was wondering about the goal that you had last year, that you had just begun to work on basically providing a joyous environment for staff and students. Given the circumstances and how overwhelmed many staff are feeling throughout the district, wouldn't it be wise to at least make an attempt to continue with that, especially for staff?
Yes. So, I think we have sort of mentioned before, but I'm glad you brought it up. When you hear these goals, these are not one-off, one-year efforts. So often what they are is launching points for more sustained practices in those areas. So a number of the practices that we had started last year, in any given year, we look to move out some less effective practices and replace them with new practices, and often the goals are the vehicle by which those new practices are developed and evolve into then ongoing work. So it's funny you bring that up. one of the pieces that, one of the small pieces that staff had identified last year, we used to, PTA, for example, would provide snacks at staff meetings perhaps once a month or something. And our teaching team at leadership had said, you know what, we would all be happy to sort of take a turn and actually have snacks every staff meeting, because at 3:30 everybody's always ready for something. So that's what started last year. Then so to start this year, we had sort of been in such a limited sense of like, what can we or can we not do? And so ironically, just recently at leadership team, the team has said, you know, we think we're at a point now where we could still do a number of those things, but just in a slightly different way. So teachers reinitiated a sign up for what staff meetings snacks will be, and to provide those. Kelly does a lot around sort of providing recognition and support. So the leadership team has identified kind of a monthly theme. So for this month, it's thankful. And right now, for example, there is a structure that, again, that so Kelly had developed, where there's sort of paper feathers, if you like, that are in several places in the school, where someone can just take one and put a note to a colleague about something they're thankful for, for their contribution. The person gets it. It can either be anonymous or it can be signed. If they want to, they can then put it into an envelope in the office, and every Thursday, so like Thankful Thursday, a few of those get pulled out, and Kelly runs an ongoing sort of teacher gift chest type thing with little bits and pieces, and those teachers come down and they can choose something from there, but all those feathers end up back with those teachers. And the school leadership team has each of them in pairs take a different month to run a different sort of theme around just sort of recognizing each other. PTA has, we approached the PTA around different ways in which they could support teachers this year. And they have been very supportive in terms of providing lunch at the last PD day, to providing sort of different snack or support opportunities throughout. So there are those things still going on that sort of started last year. It's a different format to be able to get together all together, but it's definitely still a focus.
Any other questions for Will and Kelly? Dwight.
Thank you. I have a question. When Kelly was talking to us about the after-school activities, could you elaborate? Are these new activities? Are they traditional ongoing activities that you just figured out a way to continue with? Could you describe them for me?
Sure. So those, for the most part, are existing activities that we've had in the past. And what the most of the ones that you heard described by Kelly, she separated out some that are run by community programs, but the other ones are run by teachers who do that with their sort of stipended positions that we support. And what we were excited about was the fact they were able to still find a way to support students participating in that. The STEM one was remote, and it kind of lent itself to that because it was a coding piece, and so the kids involved in it, it was really a very authentic way of collaboration over a digital medium. But the others were all in-person meets that that kids were attending.
What percentage of the school population is involved in those activities?
Relatively small this year. I would say to you that a couple of the pieces that have surprised us, I guess not really surprised us, but that is different than anticipated, which I guess is like being surprised, now I think about it, is that I don't know whether it's that parents are a little more cautious about their children participating or expanding their circles. That we have seen a reduction in participation in sports and in after-school type enrichment activities. So a smaller percentage than usual. For our school, A number of those activities are multi-grade level. So like ropes course, for example, we've got children from first grade through fifth grade who are participating. There are some that are targeted for, we try to offer some throughout the year for primary, some for elementary, and some for middle school, so that all the children have some opportunities to participate. But it's a small number this year compared to usual.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so next up is the nutrition report and goal review. Erin Dow.
How are you? I just read a tweet today that said every single day I wake up at midnight and realize that it's only 6 p.m. So, as has probably been communicated with every other administrator that you've heard from, last year was a super hectic year. Definitely the most challenging one professionally of my life, and probably personally as well. So, it's been nuts, but despite the fact that our normal operations, our normal cafeteria operations effectively went full stop in the middle of March, my department was able to accomplish virtually all of the goals that we had set out for last year. Feed the district students and our community, and we forged some new community partnerships at the end of the year, and we were able to end our year with an objectively positive financial outcome. So pretty happy to report that. First goal that I had was to improve free and reduced eligibility outreach and implementation. That went well. The numbers were up in part because the state covered the 40-cent reduced price fee that reduced eligible families would pay, effectively making meals free for all students that qualified. That was something that was seen across the state, but we really saw a huge jump in the number of applications that we received last year that ended up being reduced price eligible. The second goal was an important one for me. We have a pretty robust a la carte program here. For those of you who don't know what that is, at the middle and high school, we offer items that are outside of the normal lunch, reimbursable lunch. And that's also the case in elementary schools where students can purchase milk to go with their home lunch and so forth. And so we wanted to make sure that none of those sales were interfering in any way with our reimbursable meal sales, because every one of those reimbursable meals we sell, we get a reimbursement from the state. So we set about to make sure that that wasn't happening, and we actually had to put some things in place to ensure that. And what we primarily did here at the high school was, as students were coming through the line, there is a discrete identification on our point of sale software that identifies them as free or reduced. If that designation came up and that student was purchasing an item that could be part of a reimbursable meal, such as an apple, let's say, my staff would prompt them and say, hey, listen, you want a milk and some of these crackers with that? They would get that item for free now instead of paying out of pocket, and we would get the reimbursable meal sale. So those are techniques that are helpful and, given to us, suggested to us by the state, and it really did make a huge difference this year, as you can see in the results tables that were distributed to you. And let's see. Another goal was to engage our students, to continue to engage our students in the lunch program, the meals program. This year, or last year, in Pownell, kitchen manager Stephanie Moyer met with several grades and helped them develop their own seafood. We had a seafood menu, backyard barbecue, and a France-themed menu. She managed to get lobster on the menu, which was definitely Stephanie's goal, and we did accomplish that. And at Durham, we did a similar thing. We had grades 3 and 4 together in an assembly with me where I kind of went over with them some, basic nutrition information and also explained to them why we serve them the foods that we do with each meal so that they would understand the meal pattern. We allowed them to do a suggestion box as we did last year with a couple of other schools, and then developed a couple of meals. Some of you board members enjoyed the Asian themed menu with us last year. So those are some successes in engaging the kids in a hands-on way. As far as sustainability, I feel like we got pretty far with that last year. I was really happy, and I was even happier when we did end up going remote and we're doing a lot of remote meals, which involves a lot of packaging, that my staff, because there was such a focus on reducing a lot of the single-use items, were on their own starting to brainstorm ways to reduce packaging themselves, so packaging multiple bagels in one bag. Just little steps like that. But in terms of our formal goals for sustainability, milk straws are gone at 3 of our schools and way down at the other ones that we're working towards. Our reusable utensils at the high school and the middle school have reduced single-use plastics by 60%. And we also swapped over to reusable soup and salad bowls here, and that's been a big hit with the kids. So if you have any questions about last year's goals, I'd be happy to answer any that you have. No? Okay. So for this year, my 2 goals should complete action steps A through D of the strategic plan, goal 4, objective 4.3. So there are 2 goals as opposed to 4 last year, but they're comprehensive ones, and they're kind of intended to preserve the program's financial solvency and adaptability while we're maintaining the highest level of service to our students, irrespective of where they're actually eating their meals currently. I think the COVID pandemic has taught us all a few lessons about flexibility and humility and hard work in the face of some of the riskiest working conditions any of us have faced. And when school first shut down in mid-March, only a small number of the district staff remained in the buildings, and all of mine were many of those. So, they were forward-facing, public-serving, they were frightened, uncertain about whether it was safe to serve the food, just as parents were unsure if it was safe to pick up the food from us. But because the USDA authorized free meals for kids, we were able to provide 7 days worth of breakfasts and lunches to anyone age 18 and under who wanted them. And the feedback that we received from families about that was overwhelming, not just in terms of socioeconomic need, but we had teachers who were trying to teach and didn't have time to make the meals. We had parents who were trying to work, and these were helpful to all of those different groups. So because we were able to serve 7 meals a week for families that wanted it, we did receive a pretty generous subsidy reimbursement. The additional revenues generated because of that meal service not only covered our operating expenses, but also allowed us to effectively retire all but a small portion of the negative fund balance that the program has been carrying since I took over in 2017. Before that, so since school has resumed in hybrid mode, we've provided close to 200 students remote meals, in addition to serving the kids that are physically in our schools each day. That hybrid schedule has definitely impacted our overall sales, what we would expect in a normal year. But we're experimenting with new serving models and contemplating some other ones that I think can get us on the road to recovery with that. As it stands right now, it looks like overall our breakfast sales in the district are actually up 9% over the same period last year, which I think I have to give credit once again to my crew at Freeport Middle School, who have increased their breakfast participation by 9,900% this year. And now I lost my place. Yeah, so my first goal of the year is kind of related to COVID. I want to look at the impact that COVID has had on our operations and develop some longer range planning recommendations for the superintendent. The end goal of any nutrition program is to feed kids and feed as many of them as we can, and then use that department to support the education of the kids. And a major takeaway of the last 6 months is that while we can't predict how long this pandemic is going to last and what lasting effects it'll have on our operations, we can probably all agree that we have collectively lost the expectation that anything status quo can be expected for a long time, perhaps forever. So whatever barriers lie ahead, we can take this opportunity to formulate our best practice recommendations for the next threat, whatever that may be, to our students' access to these services that we provide. So my report to the superintendent will include an analysis of the nutrition program's pandemic response, including what worked, what hasn't worked so well, the peripheral impacts of our response on the community and the district, possible mitigation strategies, a directory of community, state, and federal resources and partnership information, and an archive of documents and parent and staff communications. Basically, everything that's kind of come out of this that I think, whether I'm here, someone else is here, you're doing it, you're not here, can be pulled and looked at again. Because I'd hate to think that all of the work that this team has done over the summer to get ready for this is just going to kind of be lost in this momentum of this shuffle. So that's definitely a goal of mine this year, just to provide the superintendent with that information. The second goal is, less timely, but super important, I think. We've been talking about it a while amongst my department and operations, is to update the inventory of all the major kitchen equipment in the district. As you all know, the capital improvement plan, sets out timelines for the replacement of equipment, but the existing plan as far as the nutrition program goes is based on information that was inputted around 20 years ago. So goals have changed, faces have changed, menus have changed, and so the goal is to go through, revise the plan, identify it, create a database of it, and then pass that information along to update that capital plan so that we can definitely get into this modern era. Anybody have any questions about those?
Molly.
Yeah, so thank you so much, and I'm super impressed by the results from last year. Even though it was such havoc everywhere, I'm in disbelief that you were able to accomplish so much, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I have heard from numerous families who were forever grateful to the schools for providing that food. So thank you for that. Now, as far as this year and the financial strength of the program, how much are you receiving from CARES Act funding per meal compared to what parents would pay? And is that less? So are we seeing
we're not
less revenue?
receiving any money, any grant money or COVID specific funds. The USDA extended the summer food service program, which is a program that's not generally available to communities like ours that have a low free and reduced percentage. The reimbursement rates per meal for those programs is higher than the normal reimbursement rate. So if I give a free meal out to anyone here right now, a free lunch, the reimbursement that we get back is over $4 per meal.
Wow.
Whereas under normal circumstances, it would be around $3 per meal. It's a little bit more complicated than that because for every meal we serve, we get a few cents worth of USDA commodities foods credits that we can use to buy food. And so it's not really an apples to apples thing. And the summer food service program reimbursement rates include some program administration fees that are not generally in a regular reimbursement. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
Yeah, so overall, this fall compared to last fall, you're seeing that you're
we have
seeing enough income from all the different sources that you have now to
I th-
mimic what you were seeing last year.
I think so.
Okay.
Is my answer. I think after this month, I'll have a better grip on that, and I'd be happy to come back or submit a report and kind of really analyze it. But there are so many moving parts right now, and I'm currently operating 4 different federal programs instead of 2, and so there's a lot of crossover and weirdness that we're all trying to figure out. I feel confident right now that we can make budget this year the way that we're going, and I also know that we have other tricks up our sleeve that are in process right now to try to maximize what we can get out of this. The costs to running this program are much higher than they are under normal circumstances because the numbers just aren't there, and the packaging, the glove changes are killing us. Gloves are $90 a case right now, and when we're as careful as we are, we go through a lot of them. So I'll get back to you on that one. I'd be happy to.
So after December, the CARES Act funding expires for many other departments in the school. Is that the case with the USDA funding for you, or are you going to have stable funding till the end of the spring?
It will be through the USDA Summer Meals Program, which is the funding formula that we're on right now, has been extended through June 30.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of chatter right now about the possibility of it being extended out beyond that. And there's also quite a bit of talk right now in the industry about really taking a hard look at universal free meals for all students nationwide, which I think we have a better chance than ever at getting to now.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Jen?
Thanks for that. Tons of good information. I just wanted to comment on, it was funny how you'd see on Facebook people were posting pictures of what they got when they went to pick up their meals. And I think that was just so great because there was no stigma at all. And everyone was just talking about how much it helped. And in that time, even the little things like that were enormous. And also you had mentioned, I can't remember what meeting it was, but we were on Zoom and you talked about your staff and how awesome they were. And I think that, a lot of that has to do with, I think we all know in our workplace that leadership has a lot to do with if people want to work and work really hard. So I think that says a lot about you. And I think you're just doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you very much.
Maddie?
Kind of a ditto. I look forward to hearing from you every year. It's just so evident that you bring your heart into your work. And when COVID hit and we knew that there's this opportunity to feed our community, I was so grateful that you were at the helm and your staff that you've brought their hearts into this work as well. So thank you.
Thanks. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank Freeport Community Services and Sarah Lundeen, who was like a tiger. We immediately connected and had this ready to roll, I think, before we even closed. And so that's been such a great partnership. And so I wanted to, thank Freeport Community Services and the volunteers that they provided through the spring to help us do some deliveries as well.
Valley?
So about the capital plan that you have as your last goal, number 2, is there a desire to try to prioritize energy efficient appliances and equipment?
Actually, right here, we have 2 new refrigerators that are coming in to replace these 2 cases right here that hold our beverages, and also a new dishwasher that uses recycling. It recycles the rinse water from the previous cycle to wash the next cycle, and then both of the new reefers are Energy Star rated, so yes.
Thank you.
And I think in general we have a lot. I mean, I've been kind of beating this drum, but there is a lot of old equipment here, but it's been well maintained and it's in good shape. But that doesn't mean that it's useful to us. And so there are some things that are on the capital plan, like big soup kettles, that aren't necessarily, don't need to be replaced. We have other appliances that are available in these modern times that can do that job much more easily, so.
I chuckled when we went on the Capitol tour because there was items on there and we were going through, I don't remember which school it was in, but Dennis had said, we're going to replace this piece of equipment in the kitchen. And they said, well, where's that? Oh, they don't even have one of those yet. I mean, so it's kind of funny. He didn't know what it even looked like.
Yeah.
It's not it's not a boiler, so it's not Dennis's world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, he didn't even realize that it was something that was even new to that kitchen. So
Yeah.
the person in the kitchen was super excited to see it on the list, though. I will
Yeah,
say that.
absolutely.
Any other questions for Aaron? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and next is the athletics report and goal review.
Good evening, all. I'll start off by reviewing the goals from last year. Goal number 1, this really pertains to our varsity coaches acting as their sports curriculum coordinator. It's something that's really been on the forefront the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. It has our varsity coaches. The expectation is that they work with all sub-varsity coaches, middle school and youth, to develop a sport curriculum, what skills and drills are taught and how and when, terminology that's used. I've stood up here before on that continuum. Probably the 2 sports that are more involved with this would be football and basketball, and probably cross-country running would be on the other end of that continuum as far as skills and drills and terminology and strategy and offense and defense. This is an ongoing yearly seasonal discussion that I have with varsity coaches at the end of every year in the evaluation process. And anytime you have a new coach, whether it's a varsity coach or a middle school coach or a JV or a first team coach, you kind of start all over with that new coach coming in. A brand new first year varsity coach who's never coached varsity before, it's probably going to take that coach 2 or 3 years before they really can start to branch out and put their fingerprint on the entire program, because they're just treading water and trying to coach their own team to begin with. If we hired a veteran first year coach, then that would be a little bit different, because as a veteran coach, you kind of know the lay of the land. You're just getting to know kids' names as far as instead of trying to build the program. The second goal update is to explore extracurricular choices for our students' needs and interests. On the athletic side, we haven't added any new teams for the last couple of years. Last year, I think I reported that there was a middle school intramural volleyball group going on at Freeport Middle School. I don't know if that's still going on this year or not. If there wasn't COVID, there would be, you're right. In this year's budget, I will be making a presentation about swimming, and that goes with this goal. Any questions about those first 2? The third is the goal around the facilities, ensure that all students have quality facilities to meet their needs. The items in red have been completed there on the bottom right-hand corner and on to the next page. Tennis courts, in this year's budget, 2021, there was an attempt to start a tennis reserve account for the replacement of the tennis courts. Due to budgetary factors, that didn't start. It's my hope that maybe this next budget round, we can actually start that reserve account. But baseball scoreboards, softball scoreboards, softball outfield fence have all been installed. The new track and turf storage building, the goal there is to put siding on that. We do have a reserve account established for the resurfacing of the track and turf. In the middle school fields, the entire Freeport Middle School field was graded and reseeded thanks to some vandalism. And I'll get to this goal again as it's part of my goals for this year. Any question on that one? All right, goal number 1 for this year, broaden and enhance the athletic department's technology to ensure better access to programs and improve communication. So once COVID hit and we got through the fall, we got through last spring and into the fall, and it looked like things were going to happen, there was a mad scramble to try to figure out how to live stream games, because due to 100 limitation on people attending an outdoor gathering, we certainly weren't going to be able to have spectators in the stands like we were accustomed to. So through the National Federation of High Schools, we obtained 2 free Pixelot cameras, and I worked with them to have those installed over the summer and through August. Where we got that camera up and running in the 1st of November. And prior to that, we had an iPad that we were live streaming as well. I had a couple of complaints once we went with the National Federation Network 100%. There is a cost to that. There is a subscription. It's $10.99 for a month. And then I think there's also a seasonal subscription rate as well. But I think the quality, once we get the bugs worked out, the quality of the picture certainly was better than the iPad. The gymnasium camera is set up. It's not calibrated yet. In order to do so, we need to get all of the weight room equipment and the cardio equipment and the mats off of the gym floor, because they have to use the lines of the basketball court to calibrate the cameras. Our thought going into the winter, should basketball be allowed, and right now it looks like it is, but you know, things can change any day, any week. All of the weight room and cardio equipment will be put underneath the bleacher footprint, so that we'll have the main court to have the practices, and that equipment will stay right there and won't have to be moved. And if you go to the next page, this is a report of the number of live streaming views and the number of video on demand views. And I just figured this out at the first of this month. But you can see that on October 27th, boys varsity soccer game against Greeley, we had over 1,000 people watching that game live.
Are you sure?
That's
not a typo?
nope.
That's crazy.
Yep. So, you know, this is Grammy and Grandpa in Florida. It can be anybody, anywhere. I went back in this morning, and of the video on demand, 12 of those numbers have gone up and increased because people have gone back and wanted to watch. The last game that we played on November 6th, our girls' game against Waynfleet, didn't make this report, but the JV team, the JV game had 86 views, and the varsity had 244. So while I had a couple of complaints about the subscription price and having to pay, you know, with the number of people that are live viewing, I think is incredible, and I think that's only going to get larger once the news is out there and the camera gets in its second year, and we go through a winter using the camera as well. To go back to that goal, the second part of that first goal was to implement the new athletic website. In large part, that was due to the Maine Principals Association also changing their website, and they went with a company called Our School Today. So a lot of what we do with our rosters, our coaches' eligibility, our student eligibility, is our game scores. We have to report those. And if we went with the same website, then everything that we do on our website automatically goes to them. So we don't have to duplicate that, the effort for every team, for every kid, for every season. The other nice piece to this that we haven't really got up and running yet is I hope that this website will take the place of Team Snap. Probably 2 or 3 times a week I get an email from a parent saying Team Snap says one thing but your website says another thing, and my general response is I don't control Team Snap. That's a coach thing. What I control is the website, and that's the most accurate place to get scheduled information. So this website can act very similar to Team Snap. It's got a mobile app. The students are all in there, and the coaches can send out messages the same way with this website that they can with Team Snap. We're just not there yet. It's brand new, and my administrative assistant and I are still kind of learning the back end of it, and so we're kind of really excited about that. The other nice thing, it's got a mobile app, which our last website did not. I just found out tonight that there's a way that I can go on and look to see how many page views our website got. In August, we got over 114,000 views. In September, over 115,000 views. In October, 126,000 views. And in November, 67,000 views. So people are going there. So we're kind of excited about that. Does anybody have any questions?
Maddie.
Thanks, Craig. I have 2 questions. The money that people are paying for that access, do we see any of that?
No, that goes to the National Federation.
That's too bad. I assumed as much. I'm also wondering, in your goals, has there been any discussion between you and Becky about the district goal around the diversity and equity and inclusion audit, and if there might be anything in those findings that might relate to your goals?
We have not had that discussion.
Molly?
So I had the same question as Maddie about the revenue from those views and all that. But now that we do have the cameras, when we go back to normal and COVID isn't impacting us as much as it is this year, do you foresee that our revenues of ticket sales will go down because people will choose to view on video or the other streaming?
So we charge
Option.
admission for home football and soccer games, and for home basketball games. The admission for soccer and football goes into an account at the central office to help, goes into a reserve account to help fund the cost of the replacement for the track and turf. The basketball account goes into an athletic account here at the high school. People I've talked to who've had these cameras for a while says it really doesn't impact attendance because everybody wants the atmosphere. The students certainly aren't going to stay at home and watch it. They're going to come and be part of the student section and be part of the, the environment. And I think, as was this year, as much as we tried to tell visiting parents that there isn't a high school in the state of Maine that's allowing visitors, visiting parents, there wasn't a game where I had to go up to the fence and tell visiting parents that they had to go away, because if they stayed, they were part of our count. And so I think, parents aren't going to stay away. Parents are going to come. And I think what this really will benefit is those who can't come, and for relatives and grandparents from away, that they can watch wherever they are in the world. They can watch this game live, or, video on demand. So, and I don't, we're going to do it for, even when we go back to normal, and we have students and fans in the bleachers. I can, we're still going to live stream everything.
Sounds like the best of both. So thank you.
So did I read right in here that the new camera system can communicate with Huddle? Because I know that's one of the things that students that are looking to play in college, they're looking for video, and it's always a hard thing to get. And one of the things I'd heard was Huddle was one that a lot of it's a popular one that people that are getting recruited are using for videos. It seems like it's a benefit to our students.
So
if
Huddle
they have
is
access to that?
Yep. So Huddle is a service, and so what our coaches did, mostly football, basketball, girls lacrosse, and field hockey, they would take their own iPad, they would videotape their game on the iPad, and then they would send the video to Huddle. What Huddle does is it breaks down the game and does stats for you of number of assists, number of tackles, number of yards run. It can break down, it's really a coaching tool more than it is a student video tool. A coach can then go in and select all the plays of third down and less than 10 yards to go, and boom, you have your 6 plays throughout the entire game that was 3rd and 10. Or a basketball coach can go in and say, I want to see all of our out-of-bounds plays underneath the basket. And boom, you've got every time the ball is out underneath the basket, you can see your plays. The coach in football, they trade videos. No other sport does. And so when we get a video of Yarmouth, our coaches can go in there and select 6 plays that Yarmouth runs all the time, select those out and send them to our football players and say, hey, watch these 6 plays because this is what Yarmouth runs all the time. I don't know as if it's used a lot for student videos for recruiting or not. I haven't had that conversation with the coaches. Students might be able to go on there once it's sent to them from the coach, and then they might be able to do something with that. So what this will do, this Pixel-Lot camera will do the exact same thing as a coach's iPad. It takes the camera, then we can download the video and send that video to Huddle.
So it's interesting, we were already videoing games before this all happened, just for our own coaching purposes.
Yep, but they weren't live.
Right. Why did they share it with the other football teams? That seems crazy.
Now that's what football does.
Jen.
So Huddle, I don't know if it's for all the teams, but that's something that like the booster raises money and coaches use to pay for it. So it's not something that that RSU 5 pays for.
Correct.
To my knowledge, I know that for basketball, I'm not sure about every other sport.
Same,
but
yep.
Yeah, so that's a big chunk of what boosters raises money for a lot of times is for the coach to have the ability to have that.
Yeah. So the Pixel-Lot cameras, they're associated with this company called VidSwap. And they're not the same company, but I think they're kind of together. They sell each other. And I just did a demo of this VidSwap, what they can do with the Pixel-Lot film and video versus Huddle. They're a competitor for Huddle. And I just sent that to all of our coaches and say, I don't know what you pay because your boosters pay, but this might be a better deal, check it out. So we're in the process of doing that as well. All right, the next, I'm sorry, there's another question. The next goal is kind of a continuation of the facility goal. By the end of this spring, I'm going to work with Dennis Willett. Hopefully, without spending any money, we can come up with a ballpark price and cost of what it might entail to reconfigure the Freeport Middle School multi-purpose field. If you look on that next page, I think I showed you this last year as well. Currently, we have the baseball and the softball field on opposite ends. And during the fall season, we put a soccer and field hockey field in the middle. During the spring, we put one lacrosse field in the middle for 4 lacrosse teams. And whenever there's a baseball game, we really can't do anything lacrosse-wise there because it's just not safe to have 4 lacrosse teams out in the outfield of baseball and softball. So we bus them to Hunter Road for practice. Busing is getting more and more difficult due to the lack of drivers. So anytime that we can reduce a shuttle bus is just a great thing to do. So what this would do is it would move the baseball field up closer to the softball field so that when you play baseball, softball, you then would have a lacrosse field over where the old baseball field was. So you could actually play baseball, softball, and lacrosse at the same time on the same facility without having to bus any kids anywhere. The next page is the participation numbers. As you can see, last spring, everybody had 0, unfortunately. This fall, the numbers at the high school were pretty good. We were down to 223. The year before, 234, 242, and 226. So we're in the ballpark, and I think given what this spring entailed, that's a pretty successful number. As you can see at both the Durham Middle School and Freeport Middle School, the numbers are significantly lower. You know, they didn't play any games, which certainly is a caveat, a carrot at the end of the stick. And so I think that certainly had a major impact on our middle school participation. They were only participating on the days that they were in school, and that too also probably played a role in just how fun it was to be with your friends or not be with your friends, depending on what cohort they were in. And then the last page is just the high school results. The big thing of note is that our golf team was undefeated, 7-0. They were Western Maine Conference champions and Class B state champions. And if you read in the paper, a week after the state championship happened, we were Class B state champions, and Greeley was they were Class A state champions. And so we arranged a little match between the two state champions, and Freeport came out the champion of the champions. And so we're thinking that we're now the best team in the state, irregardless of classification. The cross-country team, unfortunately, had the state championship canceled only days prior to it happening. The concern with bringing kids from all over the state to one site with the numbers that had really been exploding for the last week and a half or so, and also having the kids to wear a mask while they were running, where they haven't had all season long. You know, it's one thing, we did play our last couple of soccer and football and field hockey games wearing masks, but it's different wearing a mask in soccer. You do have breaks. You stand around while the ball's getting ready for a corner kick. You can be subbed out, but in cross country, there's no subs. There's no waiting for a corner kick. It's 15 to 18 to 19 minutes of all out exertion, and the feeling was that the kids really hadn't warmed up, acclimatized to that. So that, on top of the COVID situation, unfortunately, state championships were canceled. And as Brady mentioned, last night we had our virtual, live streamed high school sports awards night. We had 100 at the very high point. We had 168 devices logged on and watching. And at first I was kind of disappointed because I had 168 was the number of people watching, but it wasn't people, it was devices. And after talking to some families, they were all either 2 or 3 or 4 people watching from the same device at home. So it made me feel a little bit better that we had more than 168 people. So, but the coaches did a really nice job. It was kind of weird in an empty auditorium giving out the awards, but you know, I'm glad we could make it happen. And that's my report.
Valley.
Thank you, Craig. And I wanted to acknowledge that even though it's not on your goals here, that the goals that I see are happening in athletics too is just to provide opportunities for the kids to stay active and stay engaged, no matter what plan we're in. So I really appreciate that, and I know a lot of parents are very appreciative of that too, including just doing remote practices now with the middle school. So thank you for that, and I hope you can continue to do that no matter where we're at color-wise. And I also wanted to show appreciation for all the safety protocols that you have put in place, and how seriously everyone's taking all the distancing and masking, and hopefully we can continue with good athletics and no COVID.
Yeah, just one real quick side story. Across the top of the fence around the track, we have brightly colored 6-inch zip ties sticking up. I can't take credit for that. That was Jason Chisholm, our field guy, because I wanted to put paint on the ground, and he was thinking having to repaint those every week, and he said, what about zip ties? And I said, great. So he put those 6 feet across the top of the fence, and every coach who came into the facility, you know, I would mention, this is where your kids put your bags, and they all thought that was a great idea. So we'll keep the zip ties there for the spring in case we need them. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. I thought the awards last night were great, and you know, obviously you could tell there weren't people there, but the coaches did a good job cheering loud enough that it didn't sound like an empty auditorium. So good job for them for doing that. And you know, I think the parents appreciate having that closure to a season that was a little strange anyway. So, all right. So, all right. Board comments and committee reports. The first one on here is our board information exchange and agenda requests. I don't know if anybody has any committee report outs they want to share that have happened that aren't finance or policy already on here. Requests for items. Maddie.
Well, we've kind of joked. I hope you can hear me okay. I have a
Yeah,
filter
you're a
in
little
my
muffled
mask,
today.
so I'm going to just get really close to the mic. Oh, that's better. We've kind of joked about the FPAC advisory committee and whether or not that exists. It does. So I'm just letting you know that I was able to meet with Sean McEwen by Zoom, and he's on top of it. Just happy to meet with him, and I know he has planned meeting with Becky as well. So if anybody wants to join our happy little committee that meets very infrequently, let me know.
Any other comments? I will say that Monday I participated in the board learning opportunity to go and see what the classrooms were like with actual kids in them and teachers in them. Lindsay and I went to Durham, the high school, and then Mass Landing School, and I thought it was really helpful to see, you know, we can all look at the dots or paw prints or whatever they are 6 feet apart on the ground, but it was really helpful to see actual kids and bodies in the rooms, and the difference between, you know, starting in a kindergarten room and what 13 kindergartners looks like versus 13 fifth graders or sixth graders looks like. So I thought that was really helpful, and I appreciate the effort that all the administrators put in to host all of us, because I know there was I don't know, 3 groups wandering around the district. So thank you for that. I know you guys have a lot on your plates, and that was probably the last thing you wanted to do on Monday, but it was really helpful for me, I think. We saw specials in one school. We saw, little kids. We saw high school kids. We got to talk, Lindsay and I did anyway, with some students in a synchronous class and what they thought and how they felt about it, and, what was some of the pluses and some of the minuses. So for me, it was really helpful. So I appreciated it. Okay, so we will move on. Oh no, Jeremy's not here for the Finance Committee report. Hey Beth, you want to do it?
I'm not sure what I would do.
So I'm just teasing you. It's so in the packages you guys have the minutes from our last Finance Committee meeting, which was right before actually our last board meeting on the 4th. We talked a little bit about the budget and the early stages of what that's going to look like, how it's going to be built from a building to building perspective. Rick is trying to institute some efficiencies in the process. Previously, I think we had built it in I think it's always kind of manual, but a process that required multiple inputs of the same information in various places. So he's trying to make that a little bit more efficient, which hopefully works for everyone that way. And then we had a discussion about the Moore Street School and the potential for a performance contract on an RFQ that was sent out, so requests for qualifications. So nothing specific to a certain plan, but just what are the next steps as it relates to the work that's been done at the Moore Street School. And Dennis had really talked about the idea of really trying to bring that school in line with our other schools as it relates to the automated nature of the system as opposed to a very manual process at the Moore Street School. As you guys may recall, early in the year when all the work was being done there, a lot of that work was literally adjusting dampers and directional vents, room to room. Whereas in the other schools, it's a very automated process. Dennis can do it from his phone from anywhere. He can see the temperature. He can change what he wants the system to be doing. He can see if it's offline. So there was a talk about trying to bring that more in line with the rest of the schools. So that was pretty much what we talked about at the Finance Committee meeting. Oh, that's not true. There was the other question. Hold on. Sorry, Valley, I saw your hand up. I don't think it made it to the minutes, but we did discuss the question about cost sharing and making sure that the other towns are aware. And I'm trying to remember what the decision was. I know some of them are already aware of it being pushed back from this year, just given everything else going on. Do you recall what we were?
I was waiting for a letter to be passed around that I was going to edit.
Right. We were going to draft a letter. Who was going to do that? I think we told Rick to do it. He's not here to defend himself.
I think we did.
That's right. That's what we decided to do. So we will get that out, and at the very minimum, next month, 2 or 3 weeks from now, we will have our Becky and I will be meeting with the leadership of the 3 governing bodies in the 3 towns. So it certainly could be a agenda item at that meeting as well. So to make sure everybody is aware of the next steps from them. Okay, Valley.
Thank you. I had a question about the 2 options for updating the HVAC system. And apparently you guys decided to go with the one that is less comprehensive. I wonder what critical means in this sentence, where it says Dennis proposed to repair only those ventilation issues that are critical. So is that going to give everyone the certainty that the ventilation is where it ought to be to make it safe for everyone in the building in COVID times?
Yeah, so I think the distinction between the two is the first option is a much more broad project. It's not specific just to air quality. It's the whole system. And I think one of the discussions we had was when there were talks about, what do we do with Moore Street? Do we look to expand it? Do we, what are our options? I think one of the concerns, or one of my concerns anyway, was I don't want to redo the whole system just to then have to change it again if we're going to do some kind of major expansion a couple years down the road. So the thought was, and this is very similar, the approach Dennis is encouraging here is very similar to what they have done at the other schools to get them more modernized. Because, we know some of our systems, particularly at some of our schools, are aged, but the renovations and the improvements we've made to them sort of belie the age of the system. They bring them much more modern at a much more cost-effective way to get it done. So I don't think it's going to be at the expense of air quality, the second option. It's just kind of the stepped approach to getting it done. Is that fair from our conversation?
Yes, I would say that, the other project that we kind of were looking at was, like you said, the extensiveness. And this is kind of like just bringing it up to where he can manage it very easily, because there's the dampers that need to be monitored very carefully, I guess, during the colder months. And so this way it's not somebody physically going in. If we just can update that sort of part of the system, that it would be better run and less expensive to maintain, probably, because you don't have to have somebody going in physically.
And I think the other point that we were talking about was just we want the whole audit done throughout the district before we're deciding which of the things are the most, we need to prioritize it.
Right, that part too. Okay, and then the last board committee report is policy. Candy.
Okay. As you can see from the report that you have, we're bringing one revised policy to you today on truancy, and Cynthia will talk to you about that. We talked about two where there were no substantive changes of any kind, and you can see that there are several more there that we'll be looking at our next meeting, including the members' use of social media. And we sent that email that Becky mentioned, sent out to folks about the Title IX policies, and we had one response that was very general. And anybody else who wants to respond, we're really looking to have you make specific changes that you might suggest. And that's open until November 24th. And we will be looking at those in probably December and January in our meetings. And that's really it.
Any questions for Candy? Okay, thank you. So we will move on to the policy that you mentioned on truancy. Cynthia.
Good evening. In front of you in the pink, you have the truancy policy and the two revisions, the two major revisions in this policy. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The two major revisions in this policy are due to the recent law changes that we've had prior to last year. At the legislative session, there was a law change that moved the mandatory minimum age of attendance from 7 to 6. And so you'll see that on B. It says is at least 6 years of age. And then the other law change, which is separate than that, is we never really had any teeth for kindergarten and some of our first graders if they were not attending. So what they did was they made the law so that if a child is enrolled, like you don't have to enroll your child at 5 years old by law, but if they are enrolled and haven't decided to unenroll, then this applies to them as well. So those are the two changes here. And then of course we just went through and changed the he, she's, and changed the guardian, added guardians where it was not attached with the parents. And that's it.
The addition on page 3 of H that basically says if there's a student that is determined truant by these definitions and the team has made a good faith effort, the superintendent shall notify the board. What's the rationale behind
Yes,
that?
okay. I skipped that one. Okay. So that one isn't a law. That was just in the new updated suggested policy, and so we opted to put it in.
Is it just a way of the board to manage knowing how many students we have in this kind of status, or?
Yeah, I think it's just that, that you should, as a board, be informed of our truancy levels. Right? We report those anyway, but it's a way to inform the board of any truancy issues that we have in the district.
I'm just curious the scope of it. Like, would we expect, how frequently would we expect to see something like that?
Oh.
Monthly, weekly?
I would have said probably annually, but.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. It seemed very specific, like to the
Yes.
student's truancy. Like, is it an executive session to talk about the issue, or?
That's not how I interpret it, but I can get some clarification on the intent behind that.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
What the
I
what the
agree,
rationale.
just saying the student's truancy feels like it's going to be like sharing the name, and I don't think that's what we want.
Right. Or because, obviously we don't want to, as a board,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to know specifics about kids unless it,
Correct.
rises to that level. And I'm not sure if this does or not, but.
Let me get some clarification on that. And then if we need to change it up so it's more clear for a second read, we can do that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Valley.
So Cynthia, about the C under truancy defined, and now we have that new paragraph with for children 5 years of age and under, and we have the same number of unexcused absences or consecutive days before there are repercussions legal for parents.
There's law in, let's see.
So my question is that a legal requirement to have that number of days? Can we make the number of days different? Say extend
No,
them,
it is law.
increase them?
It is law. So
It's the enrolled piece I think she talked about. Because she's saying B and C have the same dates or number of days before they're truant, but I think C is for kids who are not required to be in school but have chosen to enroll.
So
Because you could have a 5-year-old that's not enrolled and they don't fall under this.
So is not every pre-kindergartner enrolled?
They are, but they're not. So in B, if you're 6, it doesn't matter if you're enrolled or not. You're still considered truant if you don't come. Whereas in C, if you're 5 and not enrolled, there are no rules for that. That's okay.
Right.
So if you were to combine those two, I think that's the distinction between them. Because everybody 6 and older is considered, has to be here. Whereas 5-year-olds are only required if they've enrolled. I think that's why there's different.
Right. Except my question is, you cannot attend pre-K unless you're enrolled. But these are really young children. If the parents want to enroll them, because that's the only way that they can attend the program, but they want to give them a little more flexibility and not require that they go to school pretty much every day. Do we have
So
any?
I think your question is in 20A, it is in law, the truancy has law subsection 5051, and it does specify the 7 full days and the unexcused. It's like word for word from that. Is that what you were talking about?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand anything you just said.
Sorry, I need to get lower. Okay, let me see. Is that better? Okay, So I think you were asking, if I understood you correctly, about the 7 full days of unexcused and the 5 consecutive school days, and if that's in law, and it is. And I brought it with me, so you could, because I anticipated that might be a question. So it's Title 20A, in Chapter 211 at subsection 5051. So that is pulled straight from law.
So do we have any discretion as a district to allow more flexibility to pre-K students who are very young and may not want to go to school every day, and they're so young that parents may want to say, okay, you can stay home today?
Well, to be true, and it's like 7 full days of unexcused, so, and then 5 or 5 consecutive school days. So I don't think a day here and there is going to do that. I don't think it's going to rise to that level, and maybe if they're deciding, well, maybe that's not for my pre-K, maybe it's too much for my pre-K student. I mean, I think that if there's some extenuating circumstances, that's a conversation with the principal or something. But I think if they're enrolled, this gives us the ability to say, we have so many slots, and this gives us the ability to say, your child is too. We just didn't have that ability, and we get concerned when kids aren't showing up in kindergarten, for example, and we really didn't have any teeth to that, and now this provides that for us.
So
I get your point.
Yeah. Do principals have any discretion on whether to excuse or not excuse an absence? Because if a parent calls and says, 7 days in an entire year is really not that many days for somebody that age to miss school. So if parents call and the child is not sick, or I don't know what else would qualify it for an excusable absence, is there a little more leeway that the principals have that they can excuse absences in the absence of a medical note?
I'm going to ask Julie, do you want to come up? Yes, come on, jump, Julie. Apparently I couldn't hear me say it through there.
So I think the part that seems to be getting confusing is whether it's excused or unexcused. If a parent's calling and saying, we're not coming because my child's sick, or for a valid reason, then it's excused. It doesn't come under this. If a family, though, are just deciding that they'd rather not come, we're going to have a conversation about that, because oftentimes somebody else is waiting for that spot. And so if you're really not going to fully participate, we'll work with families. It would be a really rare occasion that we would be talking about truancy for a pre-K family, to be honest. We're working with them and talking with them. But part of it is, if as pre-K is there, coming and not coming, it's starting a pattern and a trend for the rest of their school career, really. So we're going to be having those kind of conversations with families about, these are the habits we instill in kids right from the get-go as they're coming into our school. But, there's always a conversation with the family and the dialogue. So oftentimes they're unexcused when nobody's calling, we're not hearing from anyone. Many times we have contact with families.
That's great to know. I thought unexcused was you're not going without a medical note, and that was the only way to excuse it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Beth?
Well, that was basically what I was going to explain, so thank you, Julie, for telling me. Or I was thinking that was what the question was.
Any other? Oh, Lindsay?
Cynthia, just quickly, maybe they've already been caught, but just grammatically, truancy defined in A, we need another have where the has is in B as well. We need 2 halves.
So tell me, Lindsay, where?
Truancy defined.
Okay.
In A, we need another have. In B, what? We need, sorry.
I see it.
So you see it?
Yep,
and
I
in
see
B,
it.
And then in truancy procedures, B, within 5 school days, not within N.
Thank you.
Okay. We haven't done the motion yet. Sorry about that. So do we have a motion for consideration and approval of the following policy first read, JHB truancy? Jen, thank you. Second from Vali. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor? Great, none opposed.
Thank
you,
you.
Cynthia. Okay, unfinished business. Workshop on next steps to address staff survey results.
Okay, in your purple folders is a memo from me about, and I had hoped to get this out earlier, but we found the chart. Took a lot more time than we anticipated. I want to thank Cynthia for all of her work in trying to track down administrators in other districts to just give us an idea of what they're doing. So the administrative team, and they're the majority of them are here tonight. All the principals are here to answer your questions and to participate in the discussion. We met last week to just consider the feedback from the staff survey, and we want to continue with what we consider the quality program that we're providing for our students, but we also want to prevent the staff from feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. So we kind of looked at different things we could do under different headings, and that's how I've created the memo for you. For planning time, which we felt was one of the things that came out of the survey, we talked about increasing planning time by delegating more of our staff meeting time for teacher planning. And we still have 24 staff meetings left this year. So I think that could be helpful to our teachers. Some of these meetings are an hour, others are an hour and a half. We also talked about really trying to limit new learning, because when you try new initiatives, that just takes a lot of bandwidth in your learning. So we talked about limiting that to our equity goal, and also doing anything that we feel like our teachers would like around technology training on how to do synchronous learning better. And then also we're going to continue some of the work which is not new learning, like with TC or some of the work that our coaches are doing that really should help with the planning, which is compacting the curriculum, deciding what things to skip because they're not essential skills, because as we know, when we have some students who are not able to attend 5 days a week, we're not going to be able to cover the same amount of materials. One of the creative solutions that was brought forth for your consideration are around the snow days. So currently, and I anticipate this to go longer, but right now there's not the minimum number of days of 175. That's been waived, and my understanding right now is that that's waived until the beginning of the year. But I anticipate that, COVID is not going away by January 1st, so I think that will continue throughout the year. And so we talked about if we have a snow day. I know that you just approved my new options under the snow day, but for some of our teachers, they're reporting that feels almost more overwhelming to get ready for that kind of day. And so we would like to suggest that if there is a snow day, that we just consider that a day for teachers to kind of rest and rejuvenate and use that for further planning. The team also proposes, and I think in your memo there, I hope that there's a calendar in there somewhere. Okay, good. Thank you, Susanna. We propose adding 2 more early release days designated specifically for planning time for teachers, and we suggest Friday, December 11th and Friday, January 15th, because that would hit, those are both Friday days, so it would hit different cohorts. So that's kind of what we came up for around the planning. As we talked about as a board at the last board meeting was possibly just kind of putting hitting the pause button around goal implementation. And I think you saw that with Will's goal. He was lucky he went last. So he had a lot less writing to do than the other principals. And so they'll be reviewing their goals and shifting some of that work to next year. And we also will be looking at the district goals because some of those heavily impact teachers. Some of our strategic goals don't. I mean, they're around nutrition, and I think we'll be able to continue with those. So Cynthia and I would take, if you approve these steps, we would take a look at the timeline and revise that once again and delay any of the goals that are specific that would increase teacher workload. And so examples of those is that I know one of our action steps was to look at the advisory at the middle school level, and we would delay that for another year. There was a goal that we were going to start working with teachers on around community-based learning. That will be paused until next year. And then every principal will review their building goals and decide what work needs to continue and what can be delayed. And I think that we'll gave an example tonight of, they'll delay the book study on the power of our words, and every principal will look at their goals and kind of do the same. Then one of the other things in the survey that I think came through, one of the themes identified was just around the technology. There are some teachers that are far more comfortable with that than others. We have many of our staff that are, I think, beyond proficient with, and I hope that some of the board members were able to see that on their visit. So we don't want to do, this is an area where we don't want to do the same thing for all staff. This is something that is very individualized, and so I'm not going to go through all of those here, but each principal has identified how they're going to reach out to their staff to survey or connect with them one-on-one to find out, do you have the equipment that you need, and do you have the training that you need? And if you feel like you need further training, let's talk about what that may look like. Do you want to go observe one of the teachers that are, that really kind of have almost mastered it, or do you want training from one of our tech people? Whatever that is, we feel like we can individualize that. And in our current CARES grant, we do have $41,000 set aside for that type of immediate training, so that staff, can also receive additional compensation for that. Staff wellness, I was glad that Vali asked about that at DCS, and that Will was able to report out. All of our principals are very concerned about the burnout, and they're working with their leadership teams to identify ways that can kind of boost morale, because these are kind of hard times. And I think, I don't believe that staff morale rests with one person, with me or with each principal, but for all of us as a community and for our leadership teams to talk about what can we do to kind of do that. And I know that many of the principals have offered different wellness activities. I think that's something that Emily over at Mass Landing, that they started, I think, a year or so ago. So I think they have like monthly activities for the staff around that. We did look, Dwight, at all of the 4-day-a-week options, and I've outlined that in the memo to just, I hope, provide a snapshot that is not too confusing. I say that because I met with Cynthia a few times to say, what does that mean? And I really tried to shorten it down so that it wasn't super confusing, because you can see that there are no two districts in our cohort that are doing the same thing. One thing that is different is that none of the cohorts are seeing kids in person 5 days a week. We are the only district doing that for our students that are struggling the most. And we just feel like that has been a big benefit for these kids. And some of these models were built over the summer, and for us to try to go back and adopt one of those models as we were looking at them, we felt like that would be so disruptive to our teachers, as well as to our students, as well as to our families. And so we are not recommending moving to one of those models. Instead, we're looking for your support for the other steps that we have identified. So those are our recommendations, and we have our principals here for any questions that you might have that are building specific, or any just overall feedback on our thinking.
Susanna.
Thank you, and thank you for going through this. A quick question I have is just sort of the assessment of this. And when we did the survey back in October, and there was discussion about repeating that survey, and just wondering what you have, if say going to a 4-day model isn't on the table now, if that's something, what is the plan to sort of take these steps and get feedback and then consider where to go? 'Cause
we did not talk about, I think that's a great question, like how would we determine if that's effective? We did not do that step, but I think that as an administrative team, we could go back and brainstorm that. I think they meet with their leadership teams on a very regular basis, and I think that's a good place to get feedback. We could do another survey, but the first one wasn't set up as a pre and post survey, but we can talk about, I guess what I'd want to do is go back to the team and talk about, let's create criteria. If we go with these steps, how would we know if these are effective?
Okay, because that would be something that I'd really like to know about, how we're measuring that efficacy. And also, knowing that there are still avenues that we could be pursuing, such as that 4-day model or other options. And so to know what can we be doing that is really taking the load off while still achieving the goals that, you've put forward. So, thank you.
Jen.
I have a couple questions. You mentioned, Becky, that the minimum days of school has it been changed, or has it just been like non-existent this year? Can you elaborate on how that worked?
So my understanding right now is that it's just been waived. So in statute, we normally have to have 175 days, but there were many districts that delayed the starts far longer than we did. So there is no requirement currently that I'm aware of that says that we have to go to school 175 days this year.
Okay. So the snow day recommendation I think is great. I think it's something that, I'm glad you mentioned that teachers thought that passing the snow day sort of remote day was more of a problem for them, because I think that's good feedback, and I think that was a great solution to that. Having that, snow days are like extra days, so I'm sure that just would feel great. So that's the snow day. Adding the 2 half days, so those would be adding those to the current calendar.
That's correct.
They Okay, great. And one of my things too, just the last thing, like when it comes to staff wellness, like I really hope that the building principals like really utilize parents and PTAs to really reach out and ask, what people can offer. I think there's a lot of people in the community that would really love to help, and I know there's people that have, the ability to, provide services, food, things like that. So I think that's something that people would love. And the last thing I have as a comment is, I know as an example, Lisa Blyer has aides. My daughters all had her as a teacher and then have all worked in her classroom as an aide. And I know that especially during this time, she's really utilized her student aides to help a lot with technology and just kind of helping with preparation. So I think that would be a really good opportunity for if teachers had the opportunity to get student aides in all the class, if they wanted them. So I agree with all of these, except the 4-day that you don't want to do.
Valley.
So I will echo Jen's sentiment. I think this is a really thought out plan, and I think it will be effective, at least to alleviate the biggest burden. The one thing that I would like to see a little more discussion on is on the optional versus mandatory nature of some of these things. So, for example, under PD, it says that you'll be focusing on the technology needs and the equity work and compacting curriculum and all that. There, like you said, there's some teachers who may not need the technology support or may not need to learn how to compact. They may just need planning time. So I would hope that on a professional learning day, if all they feel would benefit the most is planning time, that they can just plan and are not forced to go to any of the other PD opportunities. And the same for wellness, even though it can be very well intentioned to have activities when people are feeling really overwhelmed, they may just opt to do planning instead of doing the group activity that may have been planned, which is not to say that offering great perks like snacks and things like that, obviously, but as long as it doesn't interfere with their time or their ability to choose how to spend that time. And then for the staff meetings, I really appreciate that there's commitment here to allocate some of that time, but the word some makes me, it's too ambiguous. So I would like to know whether some time is 20 minutes or is it maybe almost a full time or an hour? Because this could be a lot of time or very little time.
Yes, and I think it's purposefully ambiguous.
I figured.
And I think that's because, for example, we don't know what the equity audit's going to bring. And I think that's a goal we're all committed to going forward with. And so I don't like to promise something that I'm not going to fulfill, but I don't know whether a principal's willing to give an example of how they've done that. I know that at FHS, when it comes to the wellness things, that she recently did options for wellness, and one of the options was you can plan, and Jen reported nobody chose that one, so that was kind of fun. But Jen, go ahead.
A couple people chose that one. A couple, but not many. They could choose like baking or sewing or yoga or martial arts, and it was like about 42 out of our 50 teachers there that day chose to do wellness instead of plan, which was great. But I would say at the high school, so when we talk about staff meetings, so we've allocated every Wednesday, but for us, that's not a staff meeting every Wednesday because we have our department meetings. But the other time that we use, or the other topic that we use those meetings for is what we call targeted student support. So that's an hour-and-a-half meeting where teachers nominate student names that are struggling, and then the team of teachers sits and creates an action plan, and we try to do at least 2 students per grade level in that meeting. And so that would be something that we would still need and want everybody to participate in. That would be an example of something that's not optional, because it's crucial to have all the students' teachers there. In the configuration of our time in the day, there is no time like an 8th grade team or a 6th grade team. We don't have that at the high school, so we have to do that after school. So usually we use a full faculty meeting, then we have a department meeting, then we have a targeted support meeting. And then this year we've tried to have some wellness, or there might be a holiday week or something like that. So that would be very difficult for us to give up, in terms of that support for kids.
Well, and that's a great explanation. So thank you for saying so. I would hope that maybe we can rephrase that to say, and have as much time as possible, rather than say some. Doesn't sound like we're making enough of an effort, and I would like to show that we're fully committed to as much time as possible without interfering with other essential.
No, I think the principals definitely are committed to that.
Right.
Maddie.
So Jen offered me the perfect segue into my questions, what I'd like to hear more about. First, I want to echo Susanna's request that we have a plan in place to survey again and to consider if we're moving the needle, and if we need to take more actions. I've been thinking about tonight's meeting quite a bit, and I went back and I watched our discussion at the last meeting, because I felt like we talked about time a lot, and I wondered if we'd missed something. But when I went back and watched, I think the word was time, but what I heard in my own words, and most of us here, was about connection. It wasn't just about time, it was about connection, and it was about connection with students. And when I think about, morale being low, of course it is. If students are struggling, and who isn't? We're all struggling right now, but if students are struggling, and we know statewide students are falling through the cracks that we don't expect to see falling through the cracks, teenagers especially are severely at risk. And if we are not allowing the time for teachers to connect with those students, we're doing them a huge disservice, because who would go into teaching if they didn't want to connect with students? And so I'm a little concerned. As much as I appreciate the work that went into this, I don't see, other than what Jen just talked about, and that's where planning for connecting with students, which is great, but where will that happen? Because a teacher's not going to reach out to a student on a snow day, or during a PLD day, and that was my primary interest in the possible 4-day or 4.5-day opportunity, was that students could be connected with during that time. So I don't know if it would mean considering another alternative, or if that's somehow built in.
I guess I would like the principals to talk to that, because I feel like the connections are happening, but maybe I'm missing something. Go ahead, Maddie.
This is an inexact science, and I'm no mathematician, but I also spent this afternoon going back through the survey, and I made a little titch mark for every respondent who mentioned some desire for a more quality connection with the student, or a concern about students not doing well. And then I did sort of a percentage by school. It was 0 at Pownell, but there was a low number. But 21% at Mass Landing School, 22% of respondents at Moore Street School, 24% at Durham, 43% at Freeport Middle School, and 56% at the high school. And that maps to what I am seeing in our community, and I think probably nationwide, around teenagers really suffering during this time. And I think it also makes sense, because it's a tough time in life to be becoming a teenager and then to be a teenager. But we have, this pandemic has thrown opportunity for social connection and connection with mentors as teachers just on its head. And, you know, we're not sending high schoolers to farm school because we have a heavy instructional burden there. I don't know what we can do. I'm not a teacher, but I want to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to boost the morale of our students through boosting the morale of our teachers. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Well, I'd love to have the principals kind of just respond, because I think they know better than I do about what's happening at the individual schools, you know, with advisory and different things like that, where we're making connection.
I mean, I think that we all know that, you know, connection to kids is what allows you to teach. You know, like the better connection you have with the kids, the more content you can teach them. And seeing the kids every other day, you know, we're really in the middle of what? End of September, beginning of October in a regular school year, you know, where we're just starting to kick into that curriculum. So to think that the connections would be, you know, when that survey went out, you know, right after Indigenous Peoples Day, you're talking middle of September, and, you know, we're all used to Indigenous Peoples Day, we're off and running. And we can't be off and running because it takes a while to develop those connections, you know, through time. And I think that, you know, with masks and that, it is harder, and it's definitely something that has to be worked on and looked at. And I think it's something that's coming along. I think it's one of the things that, you know, our 8th grade team just, you know, sat down, you know, and it came out of the PLD day at Indigenous People said today, we need to bring the fun in. We need to, you know, bring in some fun. And they just, you know, start, you know, because we don't have the Fat Fridays, we don't have some of the sports and stuff like that. And they talked about, all right, what are we going to do just non-academic to bring that fun in? And I think those are the type of things that, you know, we've started to talk about, to bring in some more things like that, to, you know, live that. And, you know, things like that do help with the connections. And I think that, you know, I think it's not realistic to think that, you know, the connections, you know, where we are in a normal year, you know, after Election Day, we're not going to be in the same place because we haven't seen the kids as many times as we have in a regular time. You know, I think it is going to take time.
Well,
Maddie, would you mind just explaining, were you suggesting that there should be time that students aren't at school so that teachers can create relationships with them? Because maybe that's what I was mishearing.
No, not necessarily. I don't know what this might look like. It might be when kids are at school or when they're on their remote days. I don't know. I leave that to you as the experts. But what I see when I review this chart that we got of the companion districts, 5 out of 7 of them mention, or it's our synopsis mentions some interaction. And so I don't know what that looks like. Are they interacting one-on-one with the student by Zoom?
So I think part of what was there was that some of those districts, you know, all of us were planning somewhat of a vacuum, right, in the summer. And I think that a number of those districts chose a 4-day model primarily to clean buildings. And as such, that 5th day was around then trying to ensure there was some connection with kids in lieu of them being in school. I think that we believe that stronger relationships are created with children when you're actually in person than in a virtual context. So certainly those schools are, I think, using that time to try to connect with kids online. But, you know, I can say that from our school's perspective, there's challenges to trying to create a connection between an adult and a child or a teenager through like a FaceTime thing. They really don't want to FaceTime one-on-one with their teacher. Even in a synchronous setting for middle school, the kids are very self-conscious about having their cameras on. So it's really not the greatest format for actually that relationship building. I think that, as Ray was saying, that, you know, and it comes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier, I think for all of us, each week we're learning more about how do we try to maximize what opportunities we do have. How do we feel? I mean, I can say right now, I would have been very surprised if the first week of September we had said, yeah, we think we can navigate kids going to Wolf's Neck Farm. But by late October, we were in a position of more familiarity with this hybrid model where we were able to start to be more creative with like opportunities that can exist. And I bring that back to what I was sharing with you about after school enrichment opportunities, things that we were really doubtful, how will we offer, you know, a writing club for children? And yet once we got more comfortable with the context and the setting that we're all working in, we're able to offer those kind of activities and opportunities. You know, historically at our school, we do a community kind of collection of food to provide over Thanksgiving, and we had questioned, will we be able to do like our food pass? But we are. So our middle school kids are able, through their GMG teams, to go to our lower grades to collect. They don't necessarily go in person to like build it up, but they're making videos each day that can get shown in the rooms to explain what the process is and how they're doing. So I think that we're all working towards creating those strong relationships, but doing it in person, I think is going to be far more effective than not having children in school to connect with them. I think maximizing their time there will create those relationships.
So I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting a model, because the last thing I want to do is impose anything more on anybody. But I have been curious, and I've read about some districts having this like a learning academy. So where there are days or portions of days where students are in schools, but it's not a normal classroom kind of a day. It's more that opportunity to connect with a teacher or work on a project, or, you know, if you're struggling, spend a little bit of time catching up. And I don't know if that's something that you guys have considered.
So go ahead, Will, and then I'll also have Jen come up to talk about the labs.
So I think I would say to that, again, I'm only speaking from one voice, obviously. I truly think that's part of this evolution. So, you know, I think we've gone from great concern about missing a trimester, a third of the school year last year, to the uncertainty, and this is really one of the stresses that teachers have voiced. They're unsure from day to day, you know, are we going to be hybrid? Are we going to be green? Are we going to be red? Are we going to be temporarily red? Will I be in tomorrow? Those unknowns make it incredibly difficult for teachers, for all of us, for whom a routine and a sort of sequence and a sequential process is really the core of our work. So I think we have been wrestling with trying to balance what is our priority curriculum, what are the key pieces we want to try and make sure we're teaching children whilst we have them, because they could be out the next day for a long period of time, and that is definitely been a challenge. So fitting in some of those pieces that you're describing, I don't think we've quite, again, I can say at Durham, there are definitely times where all teachers know they're empowered to do that for their group if they're feeling that need with their group, but we are wrestling with how to balance the importance of getting some key and core learning in whilst we have direct access with the children, whilst respecting what developmental levels they're at. So we're not sort of like pushing too hard, but we are trying to navigate that pathway.
So Jen, can you come up and talk about the labs? I will say that I think it was, well, it might have been today that I met with the assistant Principal Mellon with the student, and we did, that was struggling, and we did establish that she could come to school 5 days, but she really doesn't want to come the full 5 days. So we looked at, we're, individualizing so that she could just have a space, because some of our older kids just need that and need that connection. So that's just, one example. But Jen, I think the learning labs are also open for our remote students, correct?
Yes, so we have ed techs that are connecting with students who are home. And then we also have our writing center is available for students to drop in, and that's one of our teachers that staffs that throughout the day, and the math lab as well. And so any student can access that during the day, during their study halls, or if they're home, then they can drop in at any time. It's an open Google Meet. But I think at the high school, in terms of, and I had a chance to talk during some of the visits about this, that, we're very lucky to have our advisory program every day. And so that's 45 minutes during the day when the students they have to be in their own advisory for 10 minutes. And then we have our callback system where they are able to connect with their teachers. And usually that's on a one-on-one basis or in a small group. And so they have that opportunity. I think one of the things that I have heard frequently from the teachers, which is this constant kind of along the lines of what Will was talking about, thinking about the priorities, is that the asynchronous classes, because the class size is so small, the teachers have been able to get to know those kids really well. Whereas it's harder in the synchronous class because you've got the kids who are at home and you've got the kids who are in front of you, and you're managing both. But the response from the kids at home is that the synchronous classes have been really helpful because they're keeping them on track. They're able to connect with their teachers. So it's kind of this cost benefit right now of, and the teachers are struggling with that and trying to think about how you kind of balance both things. So at the high school, some of the synchronous classes are doing a synchronous connection. They might not be doing a lengthy bit of instruction where they're checking in with students, making sure they're clear about the tasks they have, just able to see their faces with no masks on, have a quick connection, and then they get off and then focus on the students that are in front of them. And so, again, we're kind of balancing this priority, but I think that has been a challenge, that one thing that can be a benefit of connecting with these teachers and really getting to know them well is a cost in the fact that then there's not as much of a connection with the kids at home.
I don't know if Emily wants to talk about what they're doing at Mass Landing.
I'll be quick. Some of it was said. I think I just want to emphasize that I'm not surprised that teachers are concerned about kids. I think our teachers are concerned about our kids every year. I don't think that's unique to this year. It just is exacerbated when you don't have eyes on a student every day, right? I found out today I have a student who's sleeping tonight without heat, right? And I'm, you know what I mean? The idea that you don't see that student tomorrow, you see that student Friday, that's hard. So I think we need to see the lens of that data for what it is. I think the other thing is we need to be cautious about the worry and stress we feel as adults and what kids are carrying. Because I look at a lot of amazing, resilient 8, 9, and 10-year-olds every day who they're doing all right, right? Do I have some kids I'm really worried about? Absolutely. But I think for a lot of kids, we've created normalcy and structure. The school day, I think for those of you who are at Mass Landing, it actually looks pretty typical. Lindsay and Michelle, I don't know if you felt that way, that the day looks typical with the exception of its fewer kids, which has enabled teachers to have deeper bonds in some ways, right? Because you're getting to know 10 or 12 kids instead of 20 at a time. So I think the worry that teachers and all of us carry is absolutely real. But I also would caution us on putting that saying that kids are carrying the same thing. I think teachers have worked really hard to not create this is our social emotional time and this is our academic learning time. I think one of the things this district really tries to pride itself on is that the whole day is both, right? I got to see kids climbing compost hills. I don't even know when we were there, Monday afternoon. And like making guesses as to why the poop was so warm, right? And it's like this reminder. I had this moment, we turned around, the kids were like running back to the greenhouses, and I think Julie and I were like, whoa, look at that. Like, to those kids in that moment, like, life is sure looking good. So I think we do have to be really cognizant about what we're asking of all of us collectively in the system, but also recognize that there is some real bright light in it, and continuing to like think about how we use that bright light to support our kids. So,
Lindsay.
I think one of the things we're up against is staring us right in the face, and we maybe didn't make the right call when we could have done 4 days. I think there's no way our teachers wouldn't be affected morale-wise when they see our companion schools not being in school 5 days a week. But I think we made a decision, and colleges are in the same boat, right? Like my college chose only to bring back the freshmen, and other schools have brought back all the kids, and it's kind of like we don't know which one. There's no right path, but I do think the morale of our teachers, this explains a lot for me of what I saw in that survey, and I just want to thank the Strategic Communications Committee for getting that survey out. And then I want to thank the teachers that participated, and then I want to thank you guys for letting us have the discussion and then for putting a plan in place. I don't think at this stage of the game it makes much sense to change it all up again. But I do think we have to honor. If I was a teacher right now and I was going, wow, the other 7 schools around us aren't in school five days a week, that would not feel good. It would not feel good. And I want to acknowledge that for whoever's online. But I also want to acknowledge the work you guys have done, and I totally agree with snow days, although we just approved it. Scrap it. Scrap them. Who cares? The kids want snow days. Snow days are joyful. And what we all need more of right now is joy, in whatever capacity that comes, whether it's the farm. I think our high school kids, I don't know what the brainstorm is, because I do think they're different than the littles. The littles have a little more joy. The upper school it's harder. So I just want to thank everyone. I think while maybe we made the right call, maybe we didn't. We have data staring us in the face that is affecting our teachers. But now, all we can do is we have the knowledge and we use it. The planning time, that's remained ambiguous. The snow days, reducing goals. I think, making social, emotional, and some academic, scrapping the snow days, and doing what we can to support our teachers where we can is those are my notes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Susanna.
Thank you. I have a clarification question, but also want to just echo that what Maddie said. I mean, going through the survey, a lot of the comments about time do acknowledge needing time to check in with students at home or whatnot, and not having the time to do that, as well as the planning time. And, definitely acknowledge that, what Lindsay was saying. But just a question on snow days. If we're taking snow days as not a learning day, which I fully support, assuming the snow day, whatever day the snow day falls on, you run the risk of having that cohort be in class for just 1 day a week. And I'm wondering whether the Friday becomes a flexible day that would impact, if the snow day is on Monday, would a Friday class be then that Monday class, just because that Monday group may only be in once a week? And if you get a snow day recurrent, I don't want to end up with a situation where one cohort is in school, 1 day a week, several times throughout the year, and the other cohort in 3 times a week, or just you could end up with a significant misbalance.
I guess we would just monitor that, because all of the calendars have been sent home to families, and I think to start messing with that would just cause more confusion. And I just, I think if we monitored it going forward, if we started finding a significant discrepancy, then we could brainstorm on how we could make that up or do something differently. And I guess I would just like to respond for a moment to Lindsay's comment. I think one of the pieces of data that we don't have is a survey in those other districts about whether or how stressed the teachers are. Because from speaking, I mean, we meet with the Cumberland County ones, I don't think the stress, unless you did a survey for all teachers in Cumberland County, I do not feel like our teachers are more stressed than the teachers in other districts. And I understand that what you're saying, Lindsay, about if you're looking at that, I think some of the teachers think that all of the other districts have a model like Cape Elizabeth, where the 1 day a week is purely a planning day. But I think the information that they don't have is that the whole schedule was built around that, and they have less planning time and more duties on the other days. There are districts that, when Cynthia was talking to them, reported that our teachers on that extra day are feeling like they're just meeting to death. So they're feeling stress around their model, just in different ways. And so I feel like what's best for our students is that we have students that are really struggling with connection that are back, that we're able, when we see that they're really struggling, to ensure those are the kids that are being invited back 5 days a week, pre-K through 12, so that those kids who are most at risk we're able to support. So I think that our model is still a good one, even though we need to tweak it.
I don't disagree with you. That
Okay.
wasn't my point at all. But I do think teachers chat, and that was my point.
Okay, all right. Teachers definitely chat.
Hold on, Jen, just because we haven't heard from Dwight yet on this one. Dwight.
I just have a quick question. Becky, who's MSAD 51 and 75?
Cumberland North Yarmouth is 51, and 75 is Topsom.
And the surrounding towns.
Do what?
And the surrounding towns, Bowdoin,
And the
Bowdoin,
surrounding towns,
Hartswell.
yes, yes.
Not just Thompson.
That
but
would
yeah.
be like us just saying Freeport.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Jen.
Sort of off that topic, do we have a plan if we go to red to provide any days of planning for that? I know that there's been constant planning, but when Will said, that's one of the things his teachers were kind of nervous about, so if we go to red, is there a plan to give like a day, or are we just going full, like?
We don't have, I think with the pandemic, it's just so, well, you've seen it in September, that we had some grades that went red.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if all of a sudden on Friday, our cases surged in RSU 5 and we came out with 2 levels that were red, I think we would probably need a day to plan for red, especially right now at the younger levels.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going for, was maybe making a decision on that, like when things go red, or if they go red, and communicating that with parents, so parents sort of know that plan as well. I don't know if that's something that the board has to vote on or anything, but.
Well, I just think that it's going to be, if we go red at the end of January, by then, principals may be signaling that we've had enough PD around that we're kind of ready to go that way. I don't know that it would be a big lift at 6 to 12 where we're already one-on-one. So, I mean, we could do that.
I'm wondering
we-
if that would alleviate a
Some
little bit of
stress.
stress on the teachers right now if they knew that if there was a go to red, that was already in place. And I mean, I don't know if I'm kind of guessing that that's what Will was talking about. I don't know if that was actually what he meant, but you know, if that would alleviate another stress on the teachers to know that if we go red, you know, I have a day to breathe before I have to hit the ground running. I think
So-
if the administrators thought that was something that would alleviate.
So, Will, I don't know if you want to clarify your comment. And I guess I would just want clarity. Are we talking about anytime we go red with any grade, like what we did in September, or are we talking about if we shut down as a district?
I was thinking more of if we shut down as
Okay.
a district.
Go ahead, Will.
So we had communicated to staff that they would have a day to prepare for that transition. And I do think Becky's right that it would depend a little bit because it may be that we found that a day wasn't enough and we'd have to respond to that. But we have been trying to get, and we have communicated to families and to teachers, this would be the schedule if it was in red. This is what would be anticipated on a daily basis. These would be, you know, devices. This would be the process. Teachers from the very beginning of school were asked across the schools to establish like Google Classrooms and to start making sure families are familiar with that. So we've tried to balance that sense of like, you know, if we were to go here, here's some preparation and anticipation of what that experience might be. But at this point, we have communicated to our staff and I think across the elementary levels that there would be a day transition. If there was a temporary red, it does depend a little bit on the circumstances, if there's still children coming in, or that's a little bit more nuanced. But
Yeah, I wasn't at all talking
Yeah.
about that. I was just talking about if there's a full shutdown, you know, will we provide the teachers with a moment to breathe before we hit the ground running with everyone in red?
at this point, we've communicated a day.
A day. Okay, that's great. Thanks.
Wow, everybody's hand went up on that one. We'll start over here and go around. Beth.
Well, it didn't really have anything to do with the going red thing, but I just wanted to say not to discount the ability to make connections on online, virtually. I have an experience and with that someone that was having difficulty connecting because of anxiety or issues found it much easier to make that connection virtually. And so I just don't want that to get lost in when we're talking about that, because I think that it's a really important thing for a lot of kids to be able to have that connection, like you say, masks off. And, you know, it's not that every kid is just totally afraid of being alone with their teacher, because that's, you know, I know there's a broad spectrum of children. So, but I just wanted to make that, just wanted to emphasize that it is very possible to make connections online, virtually, and have it be a very positive experience. So,
Maddie.
I'm having some buyer's remorse with synchronous learning. I think Jen
Can you
was
get a
make-
little closer to your mic?
Go ahead. I'm gonna eat the thing. Jen was talking about, you know, the difficulties, and I think Beth just kind of echoed that. Like, some kids do great with it, some kids don't. I mean, everybody's has unique learning styles. I think we have to, as a district, we have to be able to course correct when things aren't working out well. And I wonder if we have if our desire to be ready for the possibility of going red fully has created way more stress than we ever anticipated. And if we need to just pump the brakes and allow a lot more flexibility, school by school, teacher by teacher, level by level, in terms of what's happening synchronously. I'm just wanting to slow us down a little bit there.
In preparation for going red? I'm sorry.
I think the idea was we wanted to make sure that we were ready to not have what happened in the spring with nobody was ready for synchronous classes. And one of the goals for going synchronous in the hybrid model was so that if that happened again, everybody was ready. Like, hey, I know I have, it's 7:50. I've got to hop into my ELA class.
Right.
Is that
at the 6 to 12 level.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Dwight.
I want to begin by also thanking the principals who helped make it possible for us to have such a interesting and meaningful experience on Monday. Thank you very much. And it was possible, Becky, to then see exactly what you're talking about, how in particular at Pownell, where students are going 5 days, that's beautiful. People are happy. Their greatest fear is they'll have to go yellow, not red. And that's a wonderful place to be. So when Maddie talks about flexibility, I want to step back and see how flexible we really can be. I'm not ready to give up the consideration of a 4-day schedule for some part of our district. I mean, when I look at the data that you have kindly collected, for the record, let's go through it. Which schools are they doing a 5-day rotation? And the answer is Cape, no. Falmouth, no. Yarmouth, no. Cumberland, no. Topsom, no. Brunswick, no. Gray, no. Freeport, RSU 5, yes. So, administrators, you're asking me to think, when I hear our faculty say they're stressed and they'd like to have more time, and you give me this data that says we're the only school that's meeting 5 days a week, you're asking me to make a real leap of faith here. I'm inclined to believe that quality time for the 4 days that our students are in school each week is more important than anything else. Quality over quantity. Now, where 5 days a week really works, why should we have to give that up? Couldn't we be flexible and say, look, if you're really happy, and I can see why, for example, at Pownell they are, and other maybe middle schools, Durham, can't we just leave it the way it is? As our kids get older, I believe there might be a difference in the way we need to try and serve our students best at different levels. Can we be that flexible? I don't know the answer to that question, but I certainly would like to have a step back and think about it, because I want to be, I want to do what's best for all of our students, and there's no reason why I think one size has to fit all. When we talk about flexibility of teachers and students in terms of synchronous learning, I agree with what Maddie just said. I was a big advocate of synchronous learning, and I still am. But after going through my tour, I can see that there certainly are different levels of comfort on the part of our teachers. And some teachers are going to do much better just not doing synchronous. Okay, if we go red, they've got to. But if we don't go red, then let's step back just a little bit and see how flexible we can be and recognize and appreciate what they have to offer otherwise. So how flexible can we be in trying to develop a model that really meets all of our district's needs. I'm not ready to step away from this 4-day consideration for some of our schools because I'm not convinced that it isn't a viable option. Making connections with students, I appreciated what Beth said. It is possible in any number of ways. I know as a teacher, if you're in class and you're in school, you can tap that kid on the shoulder and say, hey, come see me, buddy. You know, we can do some of that, and yes, they need to be here. But that doesn't mean that our teachers shouldn't be given the opportunity to try to do it online if we could give them the time. So I'm advocating for kind of taking another look at this and saying, can we be even more flexible? Because I don't see anything I don't disagree with any of your ideas. I love them. I think they're excellent. Thank you. Great. But there really isn't anything in our ideas that addresses the daily needs of our teachers and gives them more time to somehow connect with their students. That's my concern. And I believe that need, personally, I believe that need is different at different levels. Thank you.
Valley. So I appreciate that sentiment, I really do, and I wish we could give everything to everybody. But the survey was full of comments about, please, no more changes. Just let us do the thing that we're learning to do and don't make a drastic change. So that's something to think about. And I understand that for certain teachers or for certain levels or for certain schools, it could be great to be more flexible, but then we have teachers who all are under the same contract. I don't know how we could say these teachers have to be in person 4 days a week and these teachers have to be in person 5 days a week. It may create some friction within the district. So that's something that I would really not want to touch before trying something else first. And what I see here is a really well thought out plan that we can try before we make such a drastic change that we have no idea how it will impact the morale of the teachers who will have to go to school every day. And there's some elementary teachers who are going to school 5 days a week, so not every elementary school has the green plan like Pownell. So at Mass Landing, the teachers go 5 days a week and they're doing the hybrid model. So they may say, well, we don't have the benefit of the green, we're in hybrid. Why do we have to be teaching 5 days a week if the high school teachers don't have to? I mean, I don't know how this would all shake out, but I'm a little leery about making any huge changes without trying to do something a little more surgical to try to address the problem before we jump to the conclusion that we must go that way.
Beth.
I just have to take issue with one thing that Valley said, that it was all over the survey. I actually counted how many times somebody said keep things the same, and it really was only about 7. So I think that you can definitely look at the information again, and I feel like sometimes comments feel like they're said more than maybe they were. So I would encourage you to look at that again. And but I do agree with your, idea of maybe trying this first and potentially what Maddie and Susanna said, just making sure that there's, follow-up. And so we know, is it working? Is it addressing the needs? Is it, or do we need to really look at, stepping back and because I feel like if we are going to go down that route of changing the schedule, personally, it would be something that we would need to plan way out for. Like, I'm not talking like we would be like, oh yeah, next week or something, that it's something that we would have plenty, I would ideally like to have plenty of time to plan for something like that, so.
Susanna.
Thank you. I guess I want to go back to what Dwight was saying, because that was something that I know I was a proponent of prior, and definitely last meeting was talking about the quality over quantity, and teachers saying that they're there and just not feeling effective as teachers, not doing the service that they want to be doing, that they're paid to be doing, that they feel their students deserve and what they're capable of doing, and just really give that airtime. I know that having spoken to teachers in other districts who are on the 4-day-a-week plan, they're really glad that they're on the 4-day-a-week plan. And that's not all teachers. And I know that it was mentioned earlier that some of those teachers have additional stresses. They're taking on other meetings, they're taking on other things. And so this isn't to say that they're not stressed, but some of them have said that they're just really glad that they have that day, because it changes the sort of the structure, and it changes the stresses a bit. And so I just want to, I guess I just am hesitant to lose that as a model. And as far as the contract, what Volley was mentioning about some teachers, and I think it's just important to know that teachers who are doing a 4-day-a-week plan, they're not doing any less teaching. It's just, different. And I think what I really noticed, and I think what we all noticed in the spring when teachers were all teaching remotely, and we're hearing from the community that the teachers aren't really doing that much, and the teachers are saying that they're working far, far overtime, that to teach in that remote model is quite intensive. And so that, if a teacher is only actively teaching 4 days a week, that fifth day is quite intense for them. And so I don't know how that, and I just don't know how that would play out contractually, if some teachers feel that would be not fair. I don't know, but I just want to keep in mind that fifth day in a 4-week model isn't a day off in that capacity at all. And I don't know, one thing, as Volley said, that it was mentioned here, the 4-day week was mentioned also here several times, but also about the changes. Can we set something to say, well, we'll try these changes that are put forth in this document through December, and starting in January, we'll either return in a 4-day week and keep Friday as that flexible day, and either return as we have been going so far, or return in a 4-day week if it doesn't seem that what we're putting forward this far is sufficient. So I don't know. Those were just my thoughts.
So I've been taking lots of notes and comments. I haven't said anything yet.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, you know that.
The 10 minutes or the 45? She put them both on there, so I'm going to add them together. Still over. Yeah, I'm sure we are. A couple of thoughts. I think it's really hard to compare all of the different models, right? We don't have full data. We don't have full information. If all of their planning time then becomes Wednesday as opposed to splitting it out across the 5 days, is that better? Is that worse? I don't know. So it's hard with an incomplete data set to say one is better than the other. I would say on the surface, if it were me and I was looking at this chart, I would be like, geez, that seems strange to me. But I also think there could be a bit of be careful what you wish for, because you could have a lot of unforeseen implications of going down one of those roads. I do think, the first thing everybody said when they went to these 4-day models is we need to clean on Wednesdays. I think that piece has probably changed as the science has changed, but that was the number one reason they all used to start these 4-day models early on. So maybe they're changing the rationale for it now because the cleaning piece isn't as critical, but I think it's important to remember where we came from and why at the time these decisions were made. I'm really concerned about making a major change like that from a parent impact standpoint. I think it is a big change. I'm not convinced I love the idea of flexibility and not one size fits all and let's do what's right. I do think there needs to be some consistency across the district. We have families that are across schools. They need the help of their high schoolers for their younger kids in some situations. I mean, childcare is still an issue for a lot of people. And, we told the parents this was what we're going with. And we've adjusted and we've tweaked, and parents have been, really accommodating to that. But this, to me, would be a major shift in how we were doing things. And I'm not convinced there would be a major pickup from it. All of these other ideas, the idea that freeing up time doesn't necessarily create these connections, but it's not in a vacuum, right? All of this work is getting done. It's just, can they do it in a manageable time frame so it's not overtaking their whole lives? So if we're freeing up their time, and I completely agree, I circled it, some of the time for those staff meetings seems way too vague to me. If I were them, I'd be like, geez, commit to something. But all of that time that we're giving back to them, not requiring them to be in meetings that aren't critical to mission critical, that provides the time for those other things that they feel like they're lacking. So to say that they don't address each other, I think is not fair. They're definitely interconnected. But to your point on the synchronous learning, we all felt like this was important. We want to get this done, and we don't want the kids missing out on more of the curriculum than if they were in class 5 days, right? That was kind of the original goal, like get them ready for red if it comes to that. And we don't want them to only get 50% of a curriculum in a year if they're only there 2 days or 3 days a week. That has been hard, right? They haven't seen the pickup that they would like to see on some of those synchronous classes because there is a lot of management. Those type of tweaks and adjustments, I think, are fair and reasonable and don't have a huge impact from a system-wide administration perspective. I think those are the kind of tweaks, these timing tweaks, these days of the snow days, all of those things I think are very reasonable steps that we can take and see where they come from. See how much of the answers we got were just how early in the year we asked these questions, right? When people were still feeling very overwhelmed. They hadn't quite found their groove yet. So I would not be in favor of moving to a 4-day model. I'm not convinced the gain is there. I would need a lot more information on what the pickup benefit would be. But I do think what you guys have provided are all very reasonable steps that I would certainly support. Maddie.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate Susanna and Dwight, and I agree. I would be in favor of that, even though it does concern me to make another big change. I guess, this is why I've come back a couple times today to say things like, what about synchronous learning? How are we connecting with kids? What about a learning academy model? I would like to, obviously I'm in favor of everything you've proposed, and appreciate that. I would like for us to plan for when we are going to, in the short term, during winter, reevaluate, hear from our principals again, how's it going in each school? How many, what percentage of the population is at risk? Is it higher? Is it lower? Is it manageable? How are your teachers doing? Have you considered other models? What are you hearing? Should we consider the 4-day thing again? I just want us to reassess. Sorry, I'm.
Jen.
I think if we're going to ask the principals to come back, we need to put them on the beginning of the agenda.
Duly noted. Okay. So do we hear? Oh, Dwight, yep.
I want to be clear. I wasn't advocating that we switch to a 4-day schedule next week. No, that was, please, that's not where I was going. I'm making the strongest case possible, I think, that we should be still thinking about it and putting our district on notice that I like what you've done, Becky. I agree. I think it's good ideas. But I think we still have to keep an open mind to what we might need and how we go about reassessing it, and respecting the input we're getting from the front line, the people in the trenches. I think we still have to do that. Thank you.
Valley.
And Dwight, I was making the opposite case, but not because I'm against to the 40-week in under any circumstance. But I would like to try this out for a while. And then when we reevaluate, I think we should really be fair to all stakeholder groups and seek input, not just from the teachers, but also from the students and the parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think our group that came up with the plan in the summer was, had representation from all the stakeholder groups, and that was key. And I think there were, compromises made in the plan based on the feedback from all the different groups. So I think that's a really good point, Vali. Okay, so I think what I heard from everyone is that none of the items proposed for action now are contrary to, it has the support of the board, right? So you don't need an official vote, do you?
I think I need a vote on the early release days.
Oh, the
Not
early
that
release
I wrote
days.
one, but
Or the
I'm
snow
sure we
days.
can make one up.
What about the snow day one? Do you need anything on that?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. Okay, so you're gonna write something?
How about?
I'll make a motion to add to the calendar 2 early release days on the 2 days. Which were they?
Friday, December
11th, and Friday, January 15th.
Okay, do we have a second? Jen, thank you. Everybody, we're just taking 2 existing full days and turning them into 2 half days. Early release for, okay, everybody good with that? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. And obviously we'll want to communicate that out as quick as possible for anybody who's got kids they thought were going to be in school that afternoon. Because we're a little under a month away from there, right? From the first one. Okay.
And then I just want to be clear on next steps. We'll go back as a team and we'll brainstorm some ways that we think could be effective in looking at the effectiveness of these steps and bring that back to the board.
Yes, like how we're going to determine if we're
Yep.
being successful. Yep. The only thing about the snow days I would suggest is find out how that actually works. Because if it's only waived till December 31st, but it's an annual requirement of 175, you can waive as many days you want between now and December. If you still have to have 175 in June, it doesn't really help you.
Well, I don't think it's 175. I don't know if it's some type of ratio, but I will
Okay.
check on that.
I just want to make sure that we don't end up stuck thinking.
And honestly, I don't see, it's kind of like the executive order, and I know we're going to get to that, about the hybrid
School board meetings, yeah.
board meetings. The executive order ends in 30 days, but I don't think it's really ending
Yeah,
in 30
okay.
days.
I just don't want us to get surprised with something when we have to keep going to school until July. Okay, so new business, the 2 adjustments to the agenda we added. You want to do the hybrid model for the school board meetings first?
Sure. And I also want to let the principals know I appreciate them coming, and unless they're just dying to hear about the hybrid board meeting.
Yeah, they've got enough hybrid models to deal with.
I'm more
I
than
don't they care about
happy
ours.
to tell them to go home and get a good night's sleep. I think this was at the request of Mara about to revisit this, and I just need to give me a minute to my notes.
Thank you all for coming.
So I think the question is, can we have a hybrid model for board meetings so that board members can choose to either be here in person or Zoom from home? And so I reached back out. I asked a question earlier about if we have one board member who can't attend, can they vote or add into the discussion? And what was reviewed with me again today was a little bit different than what they had said the first time. So pre-pandemic, you were not allowed as a board member. The law read that you had to have the meetings in public, in person. And that Drummond Woodson's interpretation was that if there was a board member who was on a vacation in a certain place and they wanted to call in and listen, that was acceptable. but yeah, I know. But that they could, yeah, but that they could not vote or add to the discussion. And then there was a new law that was passed through the executive order that allowed us, when because of the pandemic, to go to total remote meetings. And so that's the law that's still in existence. And so when they were looking at that today, and they said that they think that there may be a way that you can do that, and Mara gave us 2 districts where her understanding is that they are doing it, and Cynthia and I reached out today, and we've tried to contact them. We happen to both have worked with those superintendents previously, but we weren't able to get in touch with them today. So we will do that, because the glitch that we need to overcome, which we'll probably be working with Keith on, is that you have to be able to notice it, which is why I said in my email today, there's no way we'll be able to do this tonight, to the public, what you're doing. You have to do all of your votes by roll call. But the more critical one is you have to figure out how all board members that are present in either remotely or in person can speak and be heard. And so that's the technology piece that we will need to, well, I've reached out to those other districts to see how they can do that. So I'm sure that it's possible, but we just need time to figure it out if that's the way the board would like to proceed. When we were in the hybrid model, the biggest issue that we even had was that Michelle and I needed to be pretty far apart to not have the kickback and the echoing. So we just need time to figure out, okay, what would that look like if there were 6 of us? And how would we be able to do that on computers and stuff? So that's where we are, if that's the direction the board wants to move in.
Yeah, so that's the update. So what is the thought of the board around, I mean, we can certainly get the legal answer, which it sounds like we have. We can do it if it's properly noticed that way. And then there's the technological piece of the discussion. My concern is more around facilitating it to ensure, I mean, these are legal votes. We need to make sure everybody's, perspective and thoughts are heard. Our live stream and our Zoom are not in sync from a time perspective. So I'm trying to, I mean, it's one thing when we have public comment via Zoom because we can wait the 10 seconds, but it might get a little more tricky if we are having a conversation or deliberations and going from board member to board member in and out of the delay. So I don't know. I mean, there might be technological ways to overcome those things which outweigh the negatives. Jen?
I'm not in favor of it at all. I think it's very confusing. I think it'll be very difficult. I think if we look at anything, we should look at one or the other. I don't think a hybrid board meeting, I just can't picture it. And if we can get more clarification on other schools that are doing it, I just think that we have a good setup here. And if everyone feels comfortable, if the majority feels comfortable, I think we should keep our meetings in person. If we vote and the board feels we should go back to full remote, we have that option as well, correct?
We do until the executive order lapses,
Okay.
which has continually been extended to this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of a one or the other of those rather than a hybrid.
Susanna?
Thank you. Two things. One is I thought on the table was also a discussion about whether we want to do the hybrid model as well as, a remote model as well as a hybrid model. And
we could.
Yeah, I thought that was more as initial comment about why we're meeting in person if we're limiting if we're trying to limit in-person meetings, why are we having these meetings in person when they could be held online? And obviously they're the optics that we're saying, schools are safe for students, but we don't want to be there, and clarify what that is. But the optics also work in the other way, where we're saying we want to keep schools as safe for students as we can, and yet we're having all of us come in here. So I guess that's just one thing, is that we wanted to be discussing that as well as the hybrid. With the hybrid though, I do have a question about that, and that's that would we be saying, and I guess this would be up for discussion, but I don't know if there's legal ramifications of it. Are we saying that it's your choice whether you want to come in or not, or are we saying if you're sick, are you not coming in, but you can still participate? Because I know on Monday I forewent the board tour, and I was looking forward to that, but I was really sick over the weekend. I had a migraine. I know it's a migraine. I get them all the time, but I couldn't answer the question, have you within the past 24 hours. And I was just sort of, saying to myself, I know it was a migraine, but I don't want to be, wrong on that. And I cannot answer the question honestly, in the past 24 hours, have I had any of the most, these symptoms? And so, it sort of had me thinking, if that had happened yesterday, would I have come in today? But then is that, so who is to say, is it free choice? And if it is, or, talking about the spacing in the room, how do you plan for that if you don't know who's coming, who's not coming? Or are we saying it's on a rota? I don't know, just those questions that I wanted to have some clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, I think everything's on the table at this point. My thought is if we were to, the will of the board was to adopt, bye Brady. Did you have something you wanted to share before you went? Because you did have your hand up. Are you good? You're just saying, okay. Because your ride's leaving. We released your ride, but not you. Sorry about that. I think the more consistent we can keep it, the better. So if, as a board, we made the decision that if you couldn't respond, like you said, if you couldn't respond honestly and clear the screener, but you weren't, deathly ill, because we don't want people participating if they're really ill either, because they should probably be getting better. That it's an option. I guess I think leaving it up to just every 2 weeks everybody decides if they want to come or not, I think it would be difficult to manage that way. But Vali.
So on the question of whether we should meet in person or remotely, full one or the other, I tend to believe that it's better for staff morale if we're here. So I'd be willing to consider you can attend remotely if you're sick, but I think to the extent that we can, meeting here sends the right message to our staff that we're not asking them to do anything that's unsafe. Well, we think that's too unsafe for us. So that's where I stand. But I'm comfortable with a remote just for sickness reasons, not because I just want to sit on my bed and participate from the comfort of my own home.
Or quarantine, right? Like if you're required to quarantine, or,
yes.
you know.
When it's sickness or COVID related, yes, absolutely. But not because of,
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I can see both sides. You know, if we had somebody who was very nervous and uncomfortable with, you know, with the risks of coming in person, would we tell them that they had to? I don't know. It's hard. Jen?
Just to clarify, I'm in agreement with Vali as well. If it was just for like a COVID related quarantine or a serious, you know, an illness, like I understand that makes perfect sense, but I don't agree with just a choice of showing up or not showing up. And I agree also with Vali. I think I would prefer to continue to keep our meetings in person.
Beth?
I agree also. I do not agree that it would, you know, be a choice, that it should only, if we do decide to go that route, that it should be only because you have to quarantine or you're sick. And I understand everybody's in a different place, but I do feel very comfortable coming in here. I feel like everybody follows the rules. We're hand sanitizing on the way in. We're washing hands. We're keeping our distance. We're wearing our masks. We're not over gathering. There's not hordes of people. I personally feel very safe. I do understand we're coming into school, and I know everybody's in a different place. And, you know, so I just would like to put that out there, that I'm fully in support of us continuing the way we are. If we can manage the, you know, hybrid sort of model with it for people that have to quarantine or are showing symptoms. But, you know, I probably foresee that if the school goes red, then, I mean, or the district has to go red, then that means we're going to go red as well, correct? So, you know, it's kind of like I will follow the, you know, guidelines that are set, and if that's what the district is doing, then I will go along with that too. So if it's better, you know, I realize there can be differing opinions, but I do feel also that it's good for us to be here. So,
Lindsay?
I agree with what has been said too, and Cynthia and Candy and Maddie know I like live meetings. I've made that pretty clear. But yes, I think it's important that our stakeholders see that we're doing what they're doing. Like Beth said, I feel really safe here. I'm sending my children into our schools. I have friends who teach in our schools. But I would be okay with the hybrid for quarantine purposes. It seems like a no-brainer. If people are quarantining or really ill, I would have utilized it when I did my back a couple of weeks ago. Instead, I was just online, but I would have participated. So I think it's a great option to have, but I think live is a really important statement, as long as we can, kind of following what our schools are doing. Thanks.
Maddie?
I also prefer to be live, but I think that if we're going to do that, we have to do a hybrid model. I feel pretty strongly about that, because I can foresee a time, and it could be our next meeting, when half of us are in quarantine for one reason or another. So I think it would be irresponsible of us not to look into the hybrid situation, and just to, you know, I feel like that would be just blind. And if we can't do that, if it's technologically infeasible, then we should have remote meetings.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's an interesting thought or comment. You know, at what point would we move to a remote meeting, right? Obviously, if the district went red, I think that's a clear indication that we shouldn't be meeting in person in here either. You know, to Maddie's point, if half of the board is quarantining or sick, probably indicates we should be moving to a remote meeting for the whole thing. You know, I think it's just there's some pieces that we'll have to figure out from the technology standpoint. I mean, I don't know if it's a screen so you can see the Zoom so you can see the people involved, because that's, that's another issue. I mean, I'm sure everybody's been on conference calls where there's that one guy who's on the phone and you totally forget he's there until you hang up on him. It's hard when we're all in person, and there's, one or two people not there. So we'll just have to figure those pieces out. Beth?
Just an idea. So like we could have an iPad that sits at like Maura's chair, and then she could like FaceTime in almost. So it's like she's kind of like live at the meeting, and then maybe Jen would have to like, reach over and like unmute her or something. Yeah.
It's
I know it's a little
synchronous.
silly, but like that's kind of like where it seems like, because she would be sitting in her seat and, able to, you could see if she raised her hand or somebody could see. I don't know.
It's
just
like we need holographic people that just.
Yeah. So I know it just seemed a little silly.
No, I mean, that's why I was thinking like maybe even like a screen. So if there's, you could see them. And sometimes I forget to look towards Susanna because she's behind Becky. Wouldn't be any worse than that, looking to the screen. So, Susanna.
I'm going to go cry now. I guess overall, I'm not really strongly favored whether it's in person or remote, except that I do think that it's paramount that everybody is able to participate in voting, because there's a big difference between taking a vacation or choosing for whatever reason not to be here than being forced into quarantine. And that's something that, being in quarantine, especially, even if it's a family member or a close contact and you don't even know that you necessarily had that exposure, you can be doing everything to keep yourself as healthy as possible and you're still, sort of forced out. And I don't know. I think it's just a massive disservice if we are preventing people who are probably quite healthy from being able to participate. And so I think from that sense that if we're going to have meetings in person, we really need to be able to go do that hybrid model. And I know I asked the question earlier about what that hybrid preference would be, if whether people had that option, and I am against that. And I think that all of us here, I assume, I don't know, what Lindsay was just saying, would like to be in person. And I don't know that any of us would choose sitting at home versus coming in here. And so I guess I'd like to have it where we can have that in-person meeting, but if you can't be here for health COVID related reasons, that you have the right to be in. And if we can't do that, I would push for that remote option, just because I do think, as Maddie said, it's paramount that we all can participate. And so I'd like to know how that technology would work, because I also feel that knowing somebody's participating, on a computer that I can't even see, and I don't know, we get so much by, making eye contact or some kind of, seeing somebody there, or just knowing, rather than having, Jen say, oh, somebody's hand is raised. So I'd like to just know how that technology aspect could work.
It's funny, Becky and I had this conversation of like, how are you better able to read people's, the non-verbal communication? Is it over Zoom with no mask or is it in person with a mask? I don't know. It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Valerie.
I just want to quickly point out too that the hybrid model incentivizes people to do the right thing and not come if they're exhibiting symptoms, because they don't want to miss a vote. So we don't want to compromise safety by not allowing people to stay home.
Agreed. Jen?
So can we take a vote on whether or not we would like to keep the meetings in person? And it sounded like everyone wanted to, well, those who spoke wanted to keep it in person and have Becky look into and make sure that we can do the ability for a member who's sick or quarantining to come in.
Via
do we have to
technology.
vote on that?
I don't think we have to.
I like straw votes.
We could do a straw vote, sure. So so a yes vote is you are in favor of maintaining the meetings in person, as long as there is a hybrid option that is feasible. That, yeah, okay. All those in favor of that? No one opposed? Okay, thanks.
So I will work with Keith and will also contact those other districts to learn from them how they're doing that.
Yeah, I
with
looked at the website for one of them today, and they don't have video from theirs. But it was interesting. Their minutes tell you if they were live or Zoom. And, you know, the couple I looked at were almost 50-50, which...
That seems hard.
God bless them. That seems hard to manage. Yeah. So, but maybe where we find ourselves eventually. So Keith was looking too comfortable over there. He'd figured out this whole Zoom participation, enjoying life. Don't get too comfortable. We got more. Yeah, all these cameras. That's right. Yeah. Okay, I still want to say for the record, there's no way 1,100 people watched that soccer game. I'm just saying. The next highest number was like 407. And it wasn't even the Yarmouth game.
Craig's going to come up on
like
here.
I know Craig's going to come running back through the door.
You're questioning the data.
Okay, so solar?
Yes.
One more thing.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It's 10:02. Do I have a motion to continue after 10 o'clock? Thank you, Valley. This is the last thing on the agenda other than public comment, so just so you know. Second? Susanna, any questions? This is just so we can continue. It's a policy to go after 10. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed?
Uh-oh.
You got it, Cynthia? No,
No,
Beth
no,
too.
Beth too.
Yeah, this should be fast.
So, was it Naomi that used to vote, or was it Kate?
Oh, always.
Yeah,
Always.
channeling a little Naomi.
Yes,
It's okay.
absolutely.
People did think we looked alike. I used to get mixed up.
Okay, so the attorney was in touch with me just via email late today. So I apologize for the lateness of this, but it's also very time sensitive. And I pretty much copied her email into this because I'm hoping you don't have too many questions. But because the attorney's not here, so I'll do the best of my ability. As you know, our last solar agreement fell through due to lack of space because we were just too late in getting in. So we don't want the same thing to happen to this. So we have met with Soltage and Revision, and they have drawn up an agreement, which you have the draft of here. And that's what the attorney is reviewing, and she could not get it finalized today. So, that's the draft that I'm giving to you. The original power purchase agreement that the board authorized contemplated that it might not get into the space that we had thought anyway. And so this document really does that. There's a new investor, and the location of our new solar farm is located in Acton, Maine, and they said that they would be happy to show us the site at some future time, so that might be an opportunity for board learning. The new investor is also asking us to agree to amend certain terms of the original power purchase agreement, just mainly to address the fact that there's a new investor and a new location of the solar farm, but also to eliminate the RSU's option to purchase a percentage of the solar farm. And our attorney does not have a problem with that. She felt like unless it's on your land, that it really is hard to do that purchasing. So she wants to make a few minor amendments, which you just do not have before you tonight. The price and the amount of the solar net energy billing credits do not change. And she feels like we don't need to vote, but I guess I'd feel better with the vote. So she did provide a motion here, and you see that that's how it would read. And now Valley's going to ask me a hard question. I just feel it coming. Oh.
Yeah, that is
Valley?
probably what you were about to say, but what percentage of our consumption is going to be covered by this? Because there was some talk about, was it going to be 75 or 80 or 85? So where do we land?
I think we were back at the not buying more, because I don't think there's enough. And weren't we at 75? Is what I remember. And so I don't think there's enough space in this one. And they just talked about if we really wanted to buy more space, we'll have to do it in another agreement.
Okay, that's good to know, 75.
Oh, I'm so happy that I could answer that.
Yeah. And I do have to say, I'm really happy that they actually were able to insert this new language that we're purchasing the credits and not the energy. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that they inserted this statement about purchasing the credits and not the energy, the electricity, because at some point the prior contract didn't have it. And there is some response to the fact that, oh, don't worry about that, but I'm glad that it's there. Thank you.
And I think even with the other one, there's been some holdup with that one. And so I think we're not as far behind as I had initially thought we were, because I don't think the other one's going to be producing solar any sooner than this one.
And if we sign it tonight, we still have access to the federal credits before they expire on the first of the year, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion to authorize the superintendent to enter into a consent to assignment and First Amendment agreement with Acton H. Road Solar One LLC, Soltage, on such terms as the superintendent, in consultation with legal counsel, deems appropriate? Susanna, second. Beth, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor? None opposed. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no personnel. Anybody left on Zoom for public comment?
We actually have 2 people that are still on. I'm not sure if you want to give them a.
Okay, so anybody, the 2 folks that are watching via Zoom, if
raising their hand.
What?
I do have someone who wants to talk.
Okay, so take it away.
If you could just.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Hi.
Hello.
If you could just.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now I see how. I haven't done this before.
I haven't done this before.
Oh my God, this is.
Done this before.
Oh my God, this is.
Could you mute either the YouTube or the Zoom? Because we're getting feedback from both of them.
I know.
Perfect.
I can hear it.
Okay.
Wait
Thank
a minute.
you.
Are you? Hold on a second. I think if I pause that and I go back to this.
You're good. We hear you just fine now.
If you could
Hello?
just. Yep. If you could just let us know your name.
I'm not sure. I'm not hearing anything. So I can't hear you. Oh, wait,
Okay,
now I got,
okay. You can hear us now. So we can hear you. There's no feedback, so you're good to go.
Boy, that was very weird. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this is Marie Wendt. I think my settings say maybe I'm Steve Gruberman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still confused. So
we hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can't hear you anymore.
Yeah, because you muted your stuff, but we can hear you. You're good.
Well, okay. But I'm not sure that I can talk to a room that I can't even figure out. Like I can't see anything any. Oh. Okay.
So Marie, we can hear you. You're coming through, and you're being
broadcast to the.
Yep, if you could just let us know your name.
I'm not sure. I'm not hearing anything. So.
Just try and.
Oh, I can't hear
goes to
you.
the next
Oh, wait,
Okay,
now I got
okay.
it.
You
Okay.
can hear us now. So we can hear you. There's no feedback, so you're good to go.
Boy, that was very weird. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this is Marie Went. I think my settings say maybe I'm Steve Gruberman. And I'm still confused. So
We hear
Can you
you
hear-
perfectly.
can you hear me?
Yep.
I can't hear you anymore.
Yeah, because you muted your stuff, but we can hear you. You're good.
Come to our rescue, please.
Okay. But I'm not sure that I can talk to a room that I can't even figure out. Like I can't see anything any. Oh. They're sitting there in silence right now. You know what?
So Marie, we can hear you. You're coming through, and you're being broadcast to the.
Yep.
I'm not hearing anything. Sienna, this is not working. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, wait,
Okay,
now I got
okay.
Okay.
You can hear us now. So we can hear you. There's no feedback, so you're hearing. 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 There's no feedback, so you're hearing.
I don't know.
Mr. DeBerg, can you unmute yourself? I did. It says talking permitted. Okay, we'll wait.
Just when we thought we had that
Holy
part
moly.
figured out.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted.
Nope, you're good. We hear you.
Your hand was up to speak. Did you want to speak?
Can
Thumbs
you
up.
guys hear me?
Yes. I don't know if he's watching, but I'm thumbs upping. I know. It's me.
I
know-
did.
nope,
I
that's-
was there was
hold
a
on.
cacophony there.
What? Is that me or him here?
So first of all, I hope you guys can hear me. That was a mess right there for a moment.
It was.
Okay, good. So
Okay, I think he's got.
I guess my first, I have a variety of comments here. First, I would say I really appreciate members of the board coming into the schools. It was really great to see you, to welcome you into our classroom. My students really appreciated the opportunity to share their concerns with you, their comments, what they thought was going well, what they thought wasn't going well. So thank you guys for taking the effort to come in and make yourself available for that information. I would also mention that you guys have spent some time this evening talking about the fact that at Freeport in the RSU 5 district, we are 5 days a week. We're the only district that's 5 days a week. And I feel like there was a recognition that that's, you know, in the RSU 5 district, teachers are working harder than the other districts. You know, for a synchronous teacher such as myself, that 5th day, you know, I'm planning for students in my building, in my classroom, as well as those who are at home, and that's just a significant increased amount of work compared to planning on somebody who's a group of students who are solely remote. So there is a significant difference in the workload that we at RSU 5 are footing compared to our neighboring, all of our districts. I mean, I don't know of any other district that's 5 days a week like we are. And I would also say kudos to us for being 5 days a week. You know, having listened to several of these school board meetings, it is evident to me that this board is very aware and cognizant of, you know, the concerns of our families in the district and the hardships that students not being in school, you know, create. So I recognize that, and I appreciate the efforts that you know, our board and our teachers are making. But I also just want to point out that that is a significant impact on the teacher workload for those in RSU 5 who are 5 days a week.
Thank you. Are you all set? Are we good?
And I'm kind of waiting for the feedback. This is kind of a funky audio thing going on right here, but I would also just add that, you know, these are hard times, and all of us are doing this heavy you know, we're all trying to figure out this COVID thing, and we can't fix COVID. And so we do the best that we can, and we just have to have a flexibility and a willingness to empathize, and, you know, let's give each other the benefit of the doubt that we're doing the best that we can. And thank you, folks. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. And hopefully I didn't go over time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Does Marie still have her hand up, or? Okay. Sorry, Marie. You know how to find us if you want to share any thoughts via email, board@rsu5.org. And we'll try and figure out what the disconnect was tonight. So thank you for everybody hung in there watching the videos. I expect to see 1,100 people watching our board meetings from now on. And I would take a motion to adjourn. Everybody's hand goes up. Susanna, Beth, thank you. All those in favor? Great. Have a great night, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.